Steps to intensify our efforts at the UK-Belgian and UK-French borders. This includes enhanced searching of inbound tourist vehicles, additional opening of car boots and transit vans, and a heightened border force presence at ports. The targeted border force presence at specific ports with additional security checks on some flights. Specialist search dogs also being deployed at key ports, including St Pancras and Dover. Well, in the last hour, an emergency Cobra meeting has begun in Westminster. Our political editor Faisal Islam joins us from Downing Street. And Faisal, all of the politicians looking at these images will have the thoughts of what happened back in Paris in November in their heads, but also what happened here in London on July the 7th.
Yes, Jane, this is an unusually rapid convening of the Cobra Committee, happening because a cabinet meeting happens to be occurring right now, just 4 hours after the bombs went off. And so at this stage, it's about establishing the facts, providing consular help to any Britons that may have been caught up in that. We have no confirmation that Britons have, but Brussels has many British citizens living and working in it. So all that help will be going out. You can see the number of the Foreign Office helpline on the strap beneath us. I'll just give it to you again, 0207 008 0000 for any friends and family with relatives in Brussels worried about these things. So this will be about establishing any British connection to any injured or victims, either at the airport or in the metro station. But you heard there from the Mayor of London, who's attending the Cobra meeting, that he didn't feel that there was any extra imminent threat in the United Kingdom. Yes, policing has been increased at ports and at airports, as you might expect. That is mainly for reassurance at this stage. And the hint I got from the Mayor of London's words on the way into political cabinet is that the threat level, which is determined by the Independent Joint Terrorism Assessment Centre, will not be raised from where it is at the moment, severe, which means that an attack is highly likely, to critical, which means that an attack is imminent. But there's plenty of logistical issues required in terms of consular help. Then they'll go on. The intelligence chiefs are in there already with the Prime Minister and members of the Cabinet, like the Chancellor, the Transport Secretary, the Home Secretary, discussing what intelligence sharing could and will be offered to the Belgians in trying to find the perpetrators and the wider networks connected to this attack. We're expecting to hear from the Prime Minister and from the Mayor of London on any extra measures, but you've heard some of them from the Home Office already. Extra searches, intensified border force controls at ports and at airports. Again, I should stress this is mainly for reassurance rather than an assessment of any extra threat. The threat level did not increase after the Paris attacks, it should be said, but we expect to hear from the Prime Minister relatively soon.
There has been a little bit of politics linked to this, Faisal. UKIP have been tweeting about what has happened and possible links with borders. I mean, is it a bit early for different parties to be making political capital from this?
I mean, it has to be said, we don't even have a full view of exactly what's happened. I mean, it's up to political parties how they want to play this right now, but emergency services is still trying to count bodies, find bodies right now. I think that there will be some degree of backlash if people are trying to make political capital out of it within 3 or 4 hours. Now, it doesn't seem the time to be making political points when British families are trying to find out whether or not their loved ones are safe. That is the priority of the government right now. I think probably it's best to ignore social media and Twitter outpourings trying to make political capital at this stage. But there will be political debates coming off of this in the days and weeks to come. Probably not the thing to be doing right now, though.
OK, Faisal, thanks very much for the time being.
Let's bring in our correspondent Alex Rossi, who's at the airport and indeed was inside the airport, the terminal itself, when the explosions occurred. You've all been evacuated, haven't you, Alex, to just outside the airport perimeter. Tell us what's happening there now.
Yeah, the building has been evacuated. There were certainly a few thousand passengers inside, including us. We've probably come, I don't know, 3/4 of a mile from the airport now. We were sort of shepherded out initially, then went a little of the way on a bus and then by foot. Now, I think most of the passengers have been taken to a crisis centre at Zaventem. Of course, they're not going to travel today by plane. They might need accommodation tonight and they need help to get back to where they are going, or where they're trying to get to. But the airport now is effectively under lockdown. We're by the side of the motorway here. We have seen a lot of emergency vehicles coming, lots of ambulances, of course. There are a number of casualties involved in this and also fatalities as well. The emergency services coming to help people inside the airport itself. Now, the explosion happened by the check-in. We were through security by that point. We were in duty-free. I was buying, along with my colleagues, we were buying chocolates for our children for Easter, and then we heard two very loud explosions. We didn't just hear them, we felt them. The walls moved, and you smelt some sort of acrid smoke. People started running out. A very, very confused picture. I think most people instinctively, like us, knew that this was a terrorist attack. It couldn't really be anything else. People knew at that point, two very large blasts shaking the building around us, that the airport was under attack.
Alex, what happens in terms of the people, many thousands, as you said, who've been taken away from the airport, the building evacuated? They've all been taken to a crisis centre. Many, of course, I'm sure will be out without their luggage, without anywhere else to go. Do you know what happens to them logistically?
Logistically, I don't think anybody knows what's going to happen to them. The authorities will have some contingency plans in place to try and get people back. How quickly they can do that, we don't know. They are probably still working through those plans themselves. Now, they could be taken to France, for instance, and flown from Paris. They could be taken further afield by coach. They could stay here until the airport reopens. But I think that could take some time. Remember, the security level has been moved up to maximum now, from 3 to 4. The city of Brussels is, large parts of it now, under lockdown. The authorities still don't know whether there are other terrorists out there active belonging to the same cell, and if there are going to be further attacks. So until they are sure of that, it's going to be very difficult to make plans and move people around. So it really is still very much something that they are working through at the moment, but a very, very confused picture when the explosions happened inside that airport. The authorities, remember, are caught up in it as well. The security people around the screening machines, the people at check-in, they don't know what's going on either. They hear two bombs, and like us, they're going to be very frightened, don't know which way to go, because, of course, most people are aware how terrorists operate, in the sense that one explosion can go off and then there'll be another attack elsewhere to try and spread and cause maximum chaos. But they're really, I think, trying to work out and assess what the threat is at this moment. Certainly we were told by the Belgian and French prosecutors yesterday, after the capture of Salah Abdel Salam, the only survivor of the Paris attacks, that some of his accomplices were still out there. We know that they discovered a cache of weapons, automatic weapons, also explosive devices as well. The thinking, of course, the speculation is that there are likely to be other weapons and other bomb-making equipment out there. Now, we don't, of course, know that this is linked to Salah Abdel Salam, but certainly that is what people are speculating at the moment, that it's something to do with his terror cell. People still on the loose.
Alex, thank you.
Sky 1 is tuning out. Turn to 501 if you'd like to continue watching us, if you're watching us on that channel. In the meantime, let's get the latest from Boris Johnson, who has news of a possible UK casualty.
Events in Brussels, and a very clear conclusion: we must show maximum possible solidarity with the people of Brussels and of Belgium. It looks as though there may be one UK casualty, as I'm sure you're aware, though the details on that are very sketchy at the moment. The most important thing to get across is that we know of no reason to think that there is any read across from what's happened in Brussels to events here in this city. We have no intelligence to suggest there is any immediate threat, but as a precaution and for the purposes of reassurance, there has been a stepping up of the presence of police at major airports.
Does that include the underground?
Of course, there's an armed presence on the underground and at major transport hubs as well. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.
So Boris Johnson there giving us some news of a possible UK casualty. Our understanding is from government sources it is not a fatality, but that of the many injured, one could potentially be from the UK. Let's bring in our diplomatic editor, Dominic Waghorn, who's here. Dominic, what international reaction has there been from world leaders?
Well, while the impact of these pictures is reverberated around the world, we've had reaction from many European leaders. We heard most recently from Francois Hollande, who said that an attack on Brussels is an attack on everyone. Everyone has been hit by this. A similar message to what he said after the attack on Paris back in November. Angela Merkel's chief of staff has said that something similar, sending messages of solidarity to the victims in Brussels. Similar messages from other European leaders, something different from Russia. The Russian Foreign Ministry says that the West's politics of double standards has led to these attacks. And Donald Trump in America, the Republican presidential hopeful, has said that he would close up American borders in the wake of these attacks. He said America's lax and we are foolish, he says. Beyond the diplomatic reaction in Europe, we've had a recalibration of security, borders being tightened around Europe, between France and Belgium, Belgium and Holland, Germany tightening its borders, greater security ordered also in the UK. The big question is whether this group that carried out this attack is related to the Paris attacks or part of a much broader network with a broader threat to Europeans across the continent.
This is Sky News at 12 o'clock. The breaking news: Brussels under attack. 2 explosions hit the departure hall at the city's airport in what appears to be a suicide bombing. Within an hour, a separate attack at Maelbeek metro station near the European Parliament. At least 26 people have been killed, dozens more are wounded.
We had a big bang, everybody cried and came along here. We saw kind of smoke.
Hundreds of troops are being sent to Brussels, with people told to stay indoors amid fears of more attacks. In the UK, security is being stepped up at key locations, including transport hubs.
We are stepping up a presence at transport hubs and at major airports, but that is purely for the purpose of reassurance.
Well, clearly it is a developing story. We'll have the very latest from Brussels here on Sky News. So one story dominating this lunchtime: the terror attacks in Brussels. The Belgian Prime Minister says that what they had feared had happened, with 3 blasts occurring at 2 separate locations. He said many are dead, many more are wounded. Let's take you through the latest developments then. This is what we know so far. 2 explosions killed 11 people and injured 35 in the departure hall at Brussels Airport at around 8:30 this morning. Now, reports say shots were fired and shouting was heard in Arabic before the blasts. And video footage from inside the terminal building shows the scene of destruction, with ceiling tiles strewn across the floor. Abandoned suitcases also littering the floor. All flights to and from the airports have been cancelled. Not very long afterwards, there was a 3rd explosion at Maelbeek metro station near to the main European Union buildings. At least 15 people are thought to have been killed in that blast, 55 people injured. Well, speaking about the attacks, the Belgian Prime Minister said this is a dark moment for our nation. We need calm and solidarity. He added that the Belgian authorities are worried there could be more attacks. So as a result of that warning, all public transport systems in Brussels are closed. Military and police reinforcements have been deployed to locations including border crossings, airports and train stations. And here in the United Kingdom, the Foreign Office says UK citizens in Brussels should avoid crowded areas. The Prime Minister has chaired a meeting of the government's emergency committee, Cobra, while the country's most senior counter-terrorism officer says police forces across the UK have increased their presence at key locations. Sky's Ian Woods reports.
Moments after 2 explosions ripped through the terminal building and passengers were running for their lives. There were reports of shouting in Arabic immediately prior to the twin blasts.
Please do a problem in the airport. Everybody has to evacuate to the gate 8:30.
There were immediate reports of casualties, but the number of dead and injured would rise steadily over the next 2 hours.
I hear an explosion and all the ceilings is going down. And then I just go under the sink, and then the second explosion went, and then everything is black. And I see, when I go out, I see a lot of people with blood, and I just run out of the airport.
One gunshot afterwards, and there was one man who was speaking Arabic afterwards, and I heard boom, an enormous explosion after people, and I said to myself, I'll try to save more people.
We felt the sound. We felt the shock waves of those explosions.
Sky correspondent Alex Rossi and his colleagues were in the departure lounge preparing to board a flight.
We're all being moved out of the airport now towards the emergency exit. There is a great deal of confusion here.
Certainly there are a number of, as you might imagine, very upset, very frightened people.
4 days after Belgian anti-terrorism officials were congratulating themselves on the arrest of the country's most wanted man, the main suspect behind the gun and suicide bomb outrage in Paris, Brussels was now under attack.
We had a big bang, everybody cried and came along here. We saw kind of smoke, you know, so the shopkeeper went out and said, no, it's nothing urgent, because they are working here.
It was a very loud explosion.
Yes, it was very loud. Yes, it was not something that fell on the ground, you know, or something like that. It was you felt kind of shock.
It was very frightening. I mean, yes. I heard it. I was
yes.
duty free. Yes. It was very frightening.
Yes, it was.
The country's interior minister immediately raised the terror alert status to its highest level. But just as he was doing so, there was another explosion. This time at Melbeek metro station, close to European Union offices. There was soon evidence of casualties there too, as the emergency services responded to 2 major incidents in different parts of the city. All metro stations throughout the Belgian capital were closed as a precaution. Images of passengers escaping from a darkened underground tunnel will rekindle memories of the 7/7 attacks in London.
I was getting off the metro station in Artois, which is the one just preceding Malbec, where the explosion took place, when we heard a loud muffled thud, and a lot of kind of dust was raised up in the down by the tracks. Some panic kind of set in. Some people started to rush out of the metro station very quickly, and they were met by soldiers at the top of the stairs who immediately evacuated the place.
Back at the airport, passengers had been herded outside the terminal for their own safety.
We're really searching now, and it's a crisis center, so I don't know yet really. So just our first thing is get people off tarmac and go to a secure area. So please line up and take the buses, please, as soon as you can. If you can, women and children first, please, for the buses. Okay, go.
Shivering passengers, unprepared for being outside in the cold, were given blankets.
How far do you think you were from the explosion?
I don't know.
It felt muffled, so I knew we were not very close to it, but we were close enough that it reverberated throughout our entire bodies. So I don't know how far, but
they said it happened
too close.
They said it happened in check-in.
Eventually, everyone boarded buses to be driven to a crisis centre which had been established at the airport. But at the same time, the Belgian authorities were advising people to stay where they were and not travel. No one knew where was safe. Belgian Prime Minister Charles Michel said what we feared has happened, and says authorities are worried there will be more attacks. He said there were many dead, many injured, and border controls had been reinforced. He told a news conference, "We realise we face a tragic moment. We have to be calm and show solidarity." There were also expressions of outrage and support from across Europe, as well as increased security at other major airports. But the attacks have again shown how vulnerable transport centres are to suicide bombers. Ian Woods, Sky News.
Else emerging all the time. We've got the latest video footage now from inside the terminal, just in the immediate aftermath of the attack.
it happen much more time? Will it happen much more time? Time? Yes, many times or no? Better soon. Stay with
We're the fucking soldiers.
A soldier can also do nothing.
Well, it really needs no description, the sheer terror you can witness for yourself there. It happened at around about 8:30 a.m. in the morning, and there were reports also of shots and some shouting in Arabic. They've been unconfirmed.
Damn it.
Our diplomatic editor, Dominic Waghorn, is here. That's, Dominic, as we were saying there, the latest we've got from inside the terminal and the immediate aftermath of the explosions. What do you see there that catches your eye?
Well, it just takes you there to the moment, doesn't it? I mean, it's terrifying, very sobering pictures as you are kind of huddling with those passengers who are bracing themselves, you'd imagine, for more explosions, having heard the initial blast. It's not, I think, exactly where the bomb went off, because the pictures we've seen of the check-in area where the bomb went off, which is thought to be near the American Airlines desk, you can see there's greater damage. The ceiling tiles have fallen in. But these were two very big explosions. They caused big plumes of smoke outside that building. They've filled this check-in area with smoke, and they've blasted the plate glass windows off the front of the building as well. So the suicide bomber or bombers who carried out this attack carried out a devastating attack that has paralysed Brussels, not just its air travel. The airport's been closed. We've seen pictures now of thousands of passengers being evacuated out onto the tarmac. Our reporter, correspondent Alex Rossi, reporting on the fairly chaotic scenes as the authorities at the airport work out what's to do with these thousands of evacuated passengers. But further from the airport, the rail links across Belgium have been closed down. The Thalys Benelux rail network has been shut entirely. The metro system in Brussels has been shut entirely because of this twin attack, it seems, another explosion on a commuter train in this metro station very close to the EU institutions buildings. And then further from that, the borders, not just around Belgium, but around Germany, France and Holland. Much greater security being drafted in as European nations try and work out whether this immediate threat is now past, but whether there's anything else that could be to come imminently.
Dominic, thank you very much indeed for the time being. Let's talk more about airport security. Norman Shanks joins me now, the former head of security at the British Airports Authority. And good afternoon to you, Mr. Shanks. This is just the kind of attack, it seems, that all airports fear. One in a, I suppose, a softer area before you go through the security to actually catch a flight.
Yes, good morning, Dom. It's been the fear of every airport operator since we had bombs at airports. It is, as you say, a soft target. It's a very public area. It's possible to restrict those areas to passengers only, but you couldn't stop a potential passenger from carrying a bomb or a device through. So it is a risk. It's one that we've lived with for a number of years. So today's events, both at the airport and on the metro line, are a case of it's happened, not a case of why has it happened, but something we've lived with as a fear for many, many years.
But what precautions, people are going to ask, what more precautions? We've seen airport security ramped up. Let's talk about the UK that you know more about, you know, for the last 40 or 50 years. Is there ever a point, though, at which you can make it as secure as it can possibly be?
Well, that's the objective, to make it as secure as you possibly can make it without creating such havoc that the business fails to operate. There is a risk in everything we do, and all we can do is try and mitigate that risk. There are people who focus on monitoring travellers as they go through the security checkpoints. Some of those people also patrol the public areas, including check-in, and I think that perhaps is the first step we should see. More and more people trained in behavioural skills techniques who are simply focusing on people in the so-called softer areas. I don't think it's practical to screen everyone going into a check-in area, because all we do is then create a secondary target because of the congestion, the confusion that would be going on, which makes it susceptible to another bomber or a drive-by shooting.
Well, there's also another consideration, isn't there, in that airports, the airport owners have invested hundreds of millions of pounds in the retailing, in the dining, in all the things that people do in airports now before they fly. And there is an economic argument for not restricting access.
Yes, indeed there is. And in fact, it's the airport operators and the passenger who pays for the security measures, not the governments. Very few governments around the world will actually pay for those security costs. But even in America, where the TSA was set up after 9/11, many airports now meet those costs themselves by having their own form of TSA. But here in the UK, security costs have been met by the airports all for the last 3-4 decades. So it is a factor that has to be taken into account in terms of how can we afford to continue to operate. The retail sales, the catering, that all goes towards the cost of operating the airport. Security costs are typically about 1/3 of an airport's actual staffing costs, so it's a huge budget that they have to meet.
Well, good getting your thoughts, Mr. Shanks. Thank you very much indeed for your time. Norman Shanks there, former head of security at BAA. We want to go to Downing Street now. A Cobra meeting, the government's emergency committee has been held there. Our political editor Faisal Islam is there, and we're going to hear from the Prime Minister soon.
Yes, we'll hear from the PM shortly. There happened to be a meeting of Cabinet going on, so we had an unusually rapid meeting of Cobra because the Cabinet ministers that were here were already present, joined by intelligence chiefs, police chiefs and others, to discuss what measures should be imposed. We've had an upping of the security and staffing at ports and airports. London Mayor Boris Johnson saying that that is mainly for reassurance, suggesting that there will be no elevation of the threat level. It's currently at the second highest level, severe, which means an attack is highly likely, though not imminently expected. That would be critical. I don't expect that threat level to be elevated after the Cobra meeting. It's actually a matter for a different organisation, the Joint Terrorism Assessment Centre. But clearly, measures have been taken by the Home Office to up security at ports, up searches from the Border Force, and to up security at airports. Right now, because the Cobra meetings happened so quickly, we're still in the kind of fact establishment phase of this, trying to establish how many, if any, British victims there are. London Mayor Boris Johnson saying that there was one British casualty. That seems to be an injury rather than a fatality. That's what we know so far, but we expect to hear from the Prime Minister confirming anything more in the coming minutes. In general, at these moments, you get an intelligence readout. Clearly, any intelligence that British authorities have will be shared with Belgian authorities. We haven't heard of any phone call from the Prime Minister to the Belgian Prime Minister just yet. Belgian Prime Minister very busy right now. But the government's central message seems to be one of reassurance, that there's no direct read across right now from what's happened in Brussels to here in the United Kingdom, every precaution being taken mostly the message about reassurance, but we'll hear directly from the Prime Minister in the coming minutes.
OK, be back with you soon for that, Faisal. Thank you very much indeed. Faisal, though, mentioning there the Mayor of London, Boris Johnson. He's spoken after coming out of that meeting in Downing Street, talking about the security implications for London, the one possibility of one UK casualty, and of course his sympathies for the people of Brussels. Let's hear what Mr Johnson had to say.
In Brussels, and a very clear conclusion: we must show maximum possible solidarity with the people of Brussels and of Belgium. It looks as though there may be one UK casualty, as I'm sure you're aware, though the details on that are very sketchy at the moment. The most important thing to get across is that we know of no reason to think that there is any read across from what's happened in Brussels to events here in this city. We have no intelligence to suggest there is any immediate threat, but as a precaution and for the purposes of reassurance, there has been a stepping up of the presence of police at major airports.
Does that include the underground?
Of course, there's an armed presence at the underground, on the underground, and at major transport hubs as well. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.
The Mayor of London with his views on whether there is a read across and implications for the United Kingdom. Well, let's talk now to John Gearson, Professor of National Security Studies at King's College London, a former government advisor on terrorism. I want to discuss that with you in a moment, John, but first of all, some people are going to wonder about, given the amount of anti-terrorist activity that's been taking place in Belgium and Brussels over the last few weeks, could this in some way be a response?
I think this sort of attack would take some planning and some preparation. It is possibly a response to the arrests on Monday in that an operation was brought forward, but I think that the reality is that this would be a group who've planned this for some time, possibly since the Paris attacks as an outgrowth of those. However, yes, it gives the impression that for every advance by the security services, the terrorists are still able to come back and do something else. And that is an impression that must be very firmly removed in the next few days.
I just want to update our viewers and listeners on the death toll, the casualties. We're now hearing from public broadcaster in Belgium that 34 people in total in the separate incidents are believed to have died, 20 in the attack on the metro and 14 at the airport. 34 people now reported to have been killed in those separate attacks at the airport and the metro station. So staying, John, with you, John Gearson, the implications for the UK, I mean, we should be in no doubt, shouldn't we, that the will to carry out something like this has existed for many years now, and just because something hasn't happened doesn't mean to say there's no threat to the UK.
No, our security services and the police have been very successful in disrupting a number of plots. Some, we're told, inspired by Islamic State. Most of the ones in the previous decade from people supportive of Al-Qaeda. And let's not forget the suicide attacks against the London transport network, whereby an Al-Qaeda-inspired, Pakistani-supported, militant group-supported group, nothing to do with Daesh itself. We've seen in the last couple of years a new, not just a new generation, but a new grouping of people radicalised, which the security services have to deal with. And they've been pretty successful so far. That's not to be complacent, but Britain has a lot of experience, but also we have pretty strict gun controls, and crucially, we've stayed out of the Schengen Agreement.
And after Paris attacks, after this, as we heard at the weekend, anti-terrorism forces in the UK preparing, rehearsing, ready to respond to these now multi-centred attacks.
Yes, this has been what originally was called the Mumbai-style attack. Now we call it a Charlie Hebdo or Paris-style attack. Perhaps we'll start calling it a Brussels-style attack. But security services for some time have been worried about the ability of armed terrorists to take control and for the momentum to be with them. That would overwhelm police forces. And so in Britain, the army, in particular, but special forces have been developing new procedures for supporting the police in these situations, which might not be in that old-fashioned Iranian embassy siege where at one point the police handed over to the trying to control a fast-moving event.
Quick thought about big Easter break coming up. A lot of people, hundreds of thousands, millions of people are going to fly from...
Britain, but clearly the idea of armed groups possibly trying to find weaknesses across Europe has to be a concern for Britain as well as every other European country.
Professor Gearson, good to get your thoughts. Thank you very much indeed. John Gearson there from King's College, London. We can talk now to Anke Gurza, a reporter for the Politico website, who's at the scene of one of the explosions at a Brussels metro station. Good afternoon to you. What was your experience? What have you seen?
Good afternoon. Well, I'm talking to you right now, just the metro station down from where the explosion took place at the Malbec station. I'm right next to the Commission and the Council, and the police have really blocked off the entire area. I'm seeing right now ambulances that are coming out from the area. They've been going in for the last few hours, trying to reach the people who are wounded. It's really difficult to get really up close. Like I mentioned, the police has blocked down the area, but you can see even now there is a helicopter hovering above us. There's police everywhere. There's soldiers as well, and they're just trying to take people out. The situation is a bit more calm right now, and there's not as many people around. There's no more traffic. There was a traffic chaos by the time that I got here. Everyone was stuck. Police was brought to the scene trying to kind of calm people down and divert the traffic. Some police officers were getting a little bit frustrated. On the way here, a woman was crying. I was coming here, and she was talking to me, saying that she's really anxious at the fact that she has to go to work now in this area. She was working here in the Schumann Malbec area that I just mentioned. So people are really scared and panicked and quite anxious.
And the information now, we hear a state of emergency, a lockdown has been declared. How is that then working in practice?
Well, I have reached out to several people working in the European Commission building right here next to me, and yes, they've been in lockdown. They've been told to stay inside because, like I mentioned, I can I can see the Commission building and I can see the metro station where the explosion took place. So they're really near to each other. This is really the core of the European district. So yes, no one has been evacuated so far, and police are warning, in fact, all people to just stay in. Don't go out. That's the main message from a press conference that a police spokesperson just had not long ago.
Okay, Anke, thank you very much indeed for your eyewitness report there. Anke Gurza there outside the metro station, at which now we are told it's thought that 20 people were killed in that, 34 people in total. Let's talk to Dominic Waghorn, and just on that death toll, Belgian media saying, as quite often happens in these awful tragedies, these awful incidents, the death toll rising.
Yes, because the figure we had earlier was 35 people were severely injured, and back then it was...
OK, sorry, Dominic, the Prime Minister speaking.
Terrorist attacks, and I've just spoken to the Prime Minister of Belgium to give our sympathies and our condolences to the Belgian people, and we absolutely stand with them at this very difficult time. These were attacks in Belgium. They could just be attacks, just as well be attacks in Britain or in France or Germany or elsewhere in Europe, and we need to stand together against these appalling terrorists and make sure they can never win. I've also made sure that we've offered every support to the Belgian security and policing and intelligence forces at this time. I've chaired a meeting of Cobra here in London to make sure that we're doing everything we can to enhance our own security, and there'll be increased police presence at ports, airports, underground stations and international railway stations, as you'd expect. But these are difficult times, these are appalling terrorists, but we must stand together to do everything we can to stop them and to make sure that although they attack our way of life and they attack us because of who we are, we will never let them win.
What is the government security assessment of the implications of the attacks in Brussels for this country?
Well, we obviously still got information coming in, and if there is information that implies there's a direct threat to the United Kingdom, then we'd raise the security threat level even higher than it is today. But it already stands at severe, which means we believe an attack is highly likely, and that has been the case for some time. So we'll continue to keep the situation under review. We'll continue to make sure that Cobra meets and to make sure we do everything we can to keep the British people safe. But we face a very real terrorist threat right across the different countries of Europe, and we have to meet that with everything we have.
Do you have news about any British nationals caught up in this?
I think it's too early to say, but we will make announcements when we have hard information. But obviously, information is still coming in. This is an appalling set of attacks. There's clearly been a large-scale loss of life, many people wounded, and when we have hard information, then obviously we'll talk very clearly to the public about it. There is already a phone number for people to ring, which they can get off the government website if they're concerned about relatives or loved ones who are in Brussels at this time.
UKIP have suggested today that this shows that the Schengen area is a threat to our security. What do you make of comments like that?
Well, I think it's not appropriate at this time to make any of those sorts of remarks. What we should be doing today is expressing our sympathies and condolences with the people in Belgium who've suffered this appalling terrorist attack. We in this country knows what that feels like because of what we experienced in 7/7. We saw what happened in Paris. This is the latest terrorist outrage. Today is a day for sympathy and condolence, for enhancing our own security, for working with our Belgian colleagues and offering them every help that we can, and to making sure we're very clear we will never let these terrorists win.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Thank you.
Prime Minister there just speaking not so very long ago in Downing Street. Let's talk to our political editor, Faisal Islam. He's there. And Faisal, the Prime Minister, referred to the Cobra emergency meeting, saying that the UK is doing everything it can to prepare for anything like that. But he said the threat level, which is at its second highest level, severe, for the time being, remains at that level.
Yes, it's early days. I mean, this is an unusually early convening of the Cobra committee, happening now just 5 hours after the bombs actually exploded. That happened because the cabinet happened to be meeting, but of course the Prime Minister wants to take the measures to reassure the public. That was the central message I got from that statement, trying to reassure the public all necessary measures enhancing security at ports and airports are being taken. He said it was too early to talk about British casualties, so we have had that report from the Mayor of London that there may be one injury, but clearly authorities on the ground in Brussels are still doing the job of trying to find injured to count the casualties. So certain messages are there being too early. On that threat assessment, it is at that second highest level of severe, which means an attack is highly likely. There hasn't been sufficient intelligence to raise that up to severe, up to critical, sorry, which would mean an attack is imminent. That didn't happen after the Paris attacks. It seems like it's not going to happen, at least in the immediate future. He also said, obviously said that he had spoken to the Belgian Prime Minister, Charles Michel, offering his condolences and every support to their security and intelligence forces, as you'd expect. And he also responded to a question about a UKIP statement criticising the Schengen area as a security threat. He said that that statement, made I think by the UKIP defence spokesperson, was not appropriate at this time. So he was asked by that. He didn't choose to raise that issue, but he was asked by that and responded saying the UKIP statement on the Schengen area was not appropriate at this time. So a message of reassurance from the Prime Minister, but it's clearly early days, not just in establishing how many British casualties there are, but also in terms of assessing whether this changes the game in terms of the threat level here in the United Kingdom, but saying that more security measures are being taken at ports and airports.
OK, Faisal, for the time being, thank you very much indeed, our political editor there in Downing Street. Well, it's just after 12:30, so let's take a look at what we know so far about events in Brussels this morning. Well, 2 explosions occurred in the departure hall of Brussels Airport, killing up to 14 people and leaving 35 injured. And unconfirmed reports say shots were fired as well, and shouting was heard in Arabic before the explosions. Now, footage that's emerged from inside the terminal shows the scene of destruction, with ceiling tiles strewn across the floor and suitcases abandoned. All flights to and from the airport have been cancelled. Now, not very long after that attack, there was a third explosion at Maelbeek metro station, and that's near the main EU buildings. At least 20 people are thought to have been killed and 55 people injured. Well, speaking about the attacks, the Belgian Prime Minister said this is a dark moment for our nation. We need calm and solidarity. He added the authorities were worried that there could be more attacks. So all public transport systems in Brussels have been closed. Military and police reinforcements have been deployed to locations including border crossings, airports and railway stations. And here the Foreign Office says UK citizens in Brussels should avoid crowded areas. David Cameron has chaired that meeting of the government's emergency committee, Cobra, and as you just heard, said the threat level remains at severe, the second highest level. Police forces in the UK have increased their presence at key locations. And this some more footage emerging from Brussels airport.
We waren wel op de grond geslagen.
Well, just a glimpse there, a graphic glimpse there of the aftermath of those explosions. It's thought, let's just talk to our diplomatic editor. Take us through, Dominic, what we know about what happened in that airport.
Well, what we know is that there were 2 explosions, and they are thought to have been caused by 1 or 2 suicide bombers. It's not clear whether it was one person operating with 2 devices, one that he or she used to kill themselves. But it's not clear exactly yet, but the blast that caused was devastating because it pulled down all the ceiling tiles. We saw just there in that quick glimpse we saw of another area of the airport closer to where the blast happened. There was a big plume of smoke rising from above the building where the check-in area was that was targeted, and then those plate glass windows were blown out the front. That led to an evacuation of the airport and panicky scenes as people fled from there. Our correspondent Alex Rossi was fairly close by, having checked in and got through to the other side, and he, not clear how close he was to the blast, but he said he could hear 2 unmistakable explosions that he immediately thought were bombs, as they turned out to have been. So the evacuation continued, and there were thousands of passengers who were taken out through the corridors of the airport, put into buses and then taken to a safe area. It's now emerged that a number of people died in those blasts and at least 30 people appear to have been injured. Now, sometime after that, another explosion appears to have happened across town, if you like, in the centre of Brussels at Maelbeek metro station, where the pictures we've seen, which some of them are too gruesome to broadcast, show at least one metro carriage completely devastated, and we've seen video of people being led to safety from that track, along the track between that station and the next one along. So down in the bowels of the earth, below a very important part of Brussels, that's the centre of Brussels, this explosion went off. At the centre of Brussels, it's called the EU area. It's where the Parlement building is, where the European Commission is based, where the European Council is based as well. Round the corner where many media offices were. So if you're going to choose a high-profile target, that's a very effective one, but it's a soft target because it's a metro. It's very, very hard to secure underground railway stations, and they targeted it tragically with devastating effect.
Well, thanks for that, Dominic. We're just hearing from the Belgian Foreign Ministry, from the Minister himself, saying after the attacks, this a quotation coming into us, we fear that people are still at large after the attacks. That from the Belgian Foreign Minister. Well, I've got Professor Gearson, Head of Terrorism Studies at King's College with me here, and we've been discussing about whether in some way this was a pre-arranged an attack that has been planned for many months. I mean, given the fact that it seems to have involved suicide bombings, you can't put that together in a couple of days, and it seems that other people have been involved.
Yes, and it's also the preparation of a reliable bomb, usually made with homemade explosives, but it needs a detonator, it needs a trigger mechanism, and we saw in London that if you don't get that mixture right, they don't always reliably work. It reminds me very much of the attacks on London on 7/7, seeing these pictures of passengers walking through darkened tunnels. The difference here being that an airport has also been attacked, and possibly the use of firearms. So slightly different from Paris, where these were marauding individuals with heavy weapons, but in its way not unique. I mean, what is unusual, of course, is simultaneous attacks on different sorts of targets, and this has been a concern of security services for many years. And in the case of Belgium, they'll be worried about further attacks perhaps in other cities. I mean, again, the scale of these attacks puts huge demands on our emergency services.
And the number of people, I mean, taking that on board from the foreign minister in Belgium, saying we fear that people are still at large, given the scale of the crackdown that's been taking place, particularly in Brussels, since November, since the Paris attacks, there are still people that they've got no idea about.
They possibly have an idea of what they're facing, but they haven't found everybody yet. The bomb makers can be crucial. The people who supply logistics. Salah, who was arrested 4 days ago, perhaps was one of the coordinating and facilitating individuals rather than the suicide attackers themselves in Paris. And so those individuals can often be very useful for intelligence purposes. But the fact is, once you've got the bombs made, it doesn't take a very large number of people to actually deliver the attack. It's the preparatory phase that involves lots of different people, and that's where intelligence can be very useful. And in Britain, we seem to have been very successful at disrupting these attacks before they got to the operational stage. That's not to say there haven't been plots to do it, and there haven't been attempts to actually get close to carrying out an attack, but we so far have managed to disrupt these attacks. And I think what we're seeing in Europe is a game of catch-up. In scale, but also in location.
Professor Gearson, thank you once again. Well, let's take a look at what happened inside the terminal straight after the first explosions at the airport. As we were telling you, Sky's Alex Rossi was also checking in at the time.
Go to the emergency exit at the tarmac, please. At the beacons. You can come this way also. Yeah.
We're all being moved out of the airport now towards the emergency exit. There is a great deal of confusion here. Certainly, there are a number of, as you might imagine, very upset, very frightened people. Again, we don't know about the number of injuries, but certainly the people I am with here certainly believe that there is a terrorist attack. Although, again, we can't confirm. That hasn't been confirmed by the authorities. But we've been moved now, as you can see probably in our live picture, we've been moved towards an emergency exit. I think, of course, there are fears that there may be other attackers. That is clearly what we have seen in the past with terror attacks on European soil. Multiple spectacular attacks by terrorists targeting key buildings, key institutions. But we're just being sort of shepherded out of the building at the moment. As I was saying, people very, very frightened, very distressed. We had just gone through, we checked in our main luggage into the hold. We'd gone through security, and we were then heading towards Gate B, where our flight to Tel Aviv was going from. We were in the duty-free shop at the time, so we were well inside the airport. Now, the explosions I heard, again, it's very hard because of the way the building is sort of built up. We were in a shop, effectively. It's very hard to work out exactly how close you were to the explosion, but it felt close. It wasn't just a question of hearing the sound. We felt the sound. We felt the shock waves of those explosions. So we were pretty close. Another indication is that we saw the sort of dust come from the ceiling and the shelves in the shop we were in. The bottles juddered on the shelves as well. It was pretty close, but again, it's difficult to say exactly how close. I did try to get towards where we think the bomb or bombs went off. The people that I saw coming towards me after the explosions looked as though they were going through a slightly different security entrance, again heading towards Gate B. In terms of injuries, I've seen people coming towards me, mainly security people, that had their clothes covered in dust, looking extremely shocked. I saw one woman who had a cut above her eye, but again, no real indication, because I think we'd already passed through that area of the check-in. So where we are now is we have moved beyond where the shops are, just after the security, where your bags are screened, and we have moved towards the gates. We'll just turn the camera around here, for instance. This will give people a better idea of the gates. You can see the planes here that would have taken off today, London Heathrow. You see the gate number up there, B36. So we're in that area now, and it appears at the moment that this is where people will have to stay until they can work out exactly what has happened and whether or not the threat is over, or whether indeed it is continuing. I was in Brussels for nearly 2 weeks after the Paris attacks, and fear was stalking the streets. People were very, very, very concerned indeed. They knew that the attackers and the plot itself had originated from Brussels. The city was under lockdown. There was a very big military presence on the streets. All of the key institutions had soldiers around them, and people were very, very worried indeed. Now, this time round, we came after Salah Abdeslam, the only surviving attacker, after he was caught in that raid, that very dramatic raid on Friday. And the tension level seemed to have dropped somewhat, and I don't know whether that is because the threat wasn't as great. Clearly, if this is a terrorist attack, that isn't the case, or whether it's just that people become inured, people become used to terror. Terror, of course, works by being shocking, being surprising, and when you become more used to that level of threat, I suppose you can't remain at such an anxious and tense level. But having said that, people were still worried. It was still, it was still on people's minds. People you would talk to would talk about the level of military on the streets, the level of security, and these are anxious times indeed. Now, that's not... Okay, from what I could pick up, go down, so head towards the exit. All the luggage stays here, which again isn't surprising. Anything that's checked in will have to be checked. I would imagine that will be a fairly time-consuming task, but I think that they still need to conclude that the threat, whatever it is over, and there aren't going to be more explosions. But we're being ushered through this area now, told to keep moving, head towards exits. Which exits isn't entirely clear at the moment, but we are on the move. We're being moved out of this area now. There's a lady here just telling people to move. What are people being asked to do?
Yeah, asked to leave their hand luggage and go down with their jackets and the purse. This is the part.
Okay, and why leave the hand luggage? Okay, so these are instructions from the police. I'm not sure what this woman's position is. I presume she works for one of the airlines, but we're being told that we have to leave this area, leave our hand luggage where it is. That instruction coming from the police, and then head out of the building. We'll just turn the camera around here. You can see this woman here telling people. I don't think anybody's listening. Nobody is leaving their hand luggage, but they are being moved out of the building at the moment. But very, very unclear, very chaotic. What exactly is happening here at the moment? We're now being moved out of the building to where the planes are parked up. We have been given instructions to leave hand luggage. No reason or explanation of why that is, although I think people can probably guess. But that doesn't seem to have been heeded by people here, including us. And we're being moved through and out at the moment.
Sky's Alex Rossi there with his report there in the aftermath of the explosions. He himself was checking in for a flight at the airport at the time. Needless to say, all flights to and from Brussels have been suspended for the immediate future. Eurostar services suspended as well. So many forms of transport locked down in and around that city. Let's talk then to Victoria Bacon, who's a spokesperson for the travel organisation APT. Thank you for talking to us. Good afternoon. Our thoughts, of course, naturally with the casualties and their families. But on the travel situation, what can you tell us about the travel chaos?
Yeah, well, as you just said there, the airport has closed, understandably, and public transport services have also closed. Eurostar have announced that all services to and from the Belgium route, the Brussels route that they have also been suspended. So essentially, if you have travel arrangements, if you're due to travel, certainly within the next 24 hours, you should keep a very close eye on your travel arrangements. You will be entitled to obviously swap your tickets, but clearly the situation is changing, it's rapidly unfolding, so the key thing is that you keep an eye on what's going on and keep in contact with your travel provider, whether that's an airline or whether that's Eurostar and on the train, which obviously is a very popular route to get into Brussels. And is it worth a glance too at the Foreign Office website and indeed what the Belgian authorities are saying about the security situation? Certainly, clearly, if you are in Brussels itself, it's very, very important that you monitor Foreign Office advice, but also monitor the Belgian Crisis Centre, which is issuing alerts hourly or more in terms of the security situation. The advice at the moment is to avoid public places, certainly again to avoid public transport and to stay where you are. So it's very, very important that if you are in Brussels that you do follow that advice. And have you got any advice for the hundreds of thousands, perhaps millions of Britons who are going to travel over what's forecast to be a miserable Easter weekend in the UK? We are already hearing from some airports in the UK that they are tightening their security arrangements. Yeah, I mean, Brussels is a popular destination the year round, but it tends to, at this time of the year, be a very popular destination, mainly with business travellers, actually, rather than leisure travel. As you say, we're running into the popular Easter break now, when people are going to be heading off overseas to many destinations. Heathrow, Gatwick and other airports have already announced this morning that they have stepped up security, certainly stepped up the visibility of that security. And I think, you know, the travelling public should be mindful of that. The advice here in the UK at the moment is a severe threat, which means we should remain vigilant, and that certainly applies when you're travelling as well. And I think that's a really important thing you should bear in mind from a travelling perspective. OK, Victoria Bacon, thank you very much indeed. The very latest there from the Association of British Travel Agents, APT. Well, let's return to events in Brussels Airport this morning. Reports of 2 explosions there, and the reports are now that 14 people were killed in them. Well, one man who survived has described to us what he saw.
In the airport, the train suddenly stopped, and we had to leave it, and everyone was in panic. We had to run just because the situation was such. Yeah, but everyone was scared, so everyone ran, and I just saw a little bit of smoke. I didn't know exactly where the explosions happened. I know that there are 2 explosions, and when I was outside, I just saw two people with heads like covered, really covered with blood, and lots of people whose hands were covered with blood. So I suppose that they were really close to the place where the explosions happened. And everyone's panicking. There are no taxis, so you cannot take anything. Everything is blocked. And everyone is crying, and yes, it's the first time I saw such a thing in my life.
Did you see or hear the explosion? No, but I walked through a mess, a load of stuff, glass splitters, smoke, water dripping from the ceiling. We had to walk through puddles, and we were evacuated. I was just waiting for my suitcase, and then somebody said over the loudspeakers, this is an evacuation. So we just were taken outside of the place.
You knew it was a terrorist attack? Absolutely. Yes.
You know what a bomb feels? I'm prior law enforcement, so
It felt muffled, so I knew we were not very close to it, but we were close enough that it reverberated throughout our entire body. So I don't know how. Be fired.
They said it happened in...
Too close.
They said it happened in check-in.
I heard an explosion, and all the ceilings is going down. And then I just go under the sink, and then the second explosion went, and then everything is black. And I see, when I go out, I see a lot of people with blood, and I just run out of the airport. Yeah, and all the building there is like, it's like a chaos there.
Well, more details continuing to come in about the attacks. 2 explosions heard at Brussels Airport. And there were unconfirmed reports also of shooting and shouting in Arabic. Well, perhaps this next bit of information has a bearing on that. Unconfirmed reports, I say, of shooting. But police now reported to be saying that they found a Kalashnikov assault rifle next to a dead attacker at Brussels Airport. This the latest report that a Kalashnikov, an assault rifle, found next to one of the attackers at Brussels Airport. Let's get an assessment with Professor John Gearson, Professor of National Security Studies at King's College London. And Professor Gearson, that's the point, isn't it, that no one's claimed responsibility yet, but already the authorities have said, and all the fingers point towards this form of terrorism being to blame.
Yes, and the use of high-powered automatic weapons in urban centres is something that countries like Britain have not experienced in the way that Paris and now Brussels has. To some extent to do with laxer gun control, but also the presence of weapons on the continent of Europe. Many of these Kalashnikovs actually come from the breakup of Yugoslavia still, and from the turmoil that occurred there. You know, these are not coming from Syria or Iraq. There are established routes for smuggling weapons by criminal gangs, and most of them come out of the Balkans, where many of these weapons were produced in former Soviet republics, of course, for many years.
And of course, if this weapon and indeed the bombs, the suicide belts, whatever were involved in the explosions, if they tried to get them beyond security, beyond airport security, they would naturally have been picked up. And this, therefore, is a roundabout way of saying this is the soft target, the soft underbelly of nearly every airport that exists, the pre-check-in area.
Well, yes, and that applies to any place in cities where large numbers of people assemble. I mean, terrorists have tended to favour transportation infrastructure, although in the case of Paris, they also attacked a football stadium or tried to gain entry. I mean, the interesting thing is the security checks at stadiums and shopping centres in many parts of the world have been moved to the outside to be a cordon. Of course, airports have been focused very much on preventing people from getting bombs onto aircraft. And there is a debate about whether people should be allowed to say goodbye to their loved ones at airports, or whether we should move to a system where there's actually the security is pushed to the perimeter of the airports, and only people with tickets, with boarding passes, who are checked at these perimeters are allowed to go. But this would be a fundamental change to how many modern airports have been organised, and of course, as you were discussing earlier, would change the funding model for many of these airports as well, who rely on people coming and spending the several hours before departure, spending money in shops and restaurants and cafes at the airport.
And how much coordination and how much information will the British security services be receiving, be getting from this latest attack? Will they say, will you tell us that really they've discounted this kind of attack? That's all in the planning. We've seen they've openly rehearsed for multi-centre attacks within the capital. This won't change anything.
Well, certainly this sort of new type of attack has been exercised and planned for. The police went public at the end of last year and held a very high-profile exercise right next to my university, where people role-played with Kalashnikovs, and the police had to respond to this. But clearly, anything that comes out of this particular attack will be important. Anything that's coming out of the interrogation of the suspect arrested earlier in the week will be passed on in due course. So that I think we have to be realistic about, at the moment, the Brussels authorities will probably not be fielding lots of information requests at the moment. They'll be rather focused on what allies and partners can do to help them deal with this fast-moving situation at the moment. Our threat level is actually decided by our JTAC organisation, not by ministers. So although,
just explain JTAC.
So the Joint Terrorism Analysis Centre, which was set up several years ago, which brings together all the analytical capability across the various agencies and government departments thinking about terrorism, were given responsibility by the government for assessing the threat level. So the 5 stages of the threat level were supposed to be depoliticised, but by handing this over to officials, essentially. So, because there was a criticism that in the past ministers might have thought, used crises to their political advantage. To avoid that, it's been placed in the hands of JTAC, and they will decide whether the intelligence they've got about the threat facing the UK justifies raising the level to critical, meaning an attack is imminent, or leaving where it is.
But just explain that. I mean, I've read some commentators say, well, how can you actually reach that level? Because if an attack is imminent, you know about it, so therefore, why don't you stop it?
Well, there is an interesting question about these threat levels. We have 5 tiers in this threat level, and we haven't been below the middle level ever. Since they were established, so you can discount the bottom 2 because there is a residual threat from terrorism. The other criticism is that what does the public do with this information when it goes up or down to some extent? But I think it does show the seriousness that something's taken, and it gives an explanation to the public about why they might be inconvenienced more than at other times.
Professor Gearson, thank you very much. The Chancellor is actually speaking in the House of Commons now and is addressing this issue.
Locations, including transport hubs, to protect the public and provide reassurance. In London, the Metropolitan Police have deployed additional officers to patrol the key locations and on the transport network, and border force efforts have been intensified. It's still too soon yet to comment on the details of these attacks, which are still emerging, but the government would reiterate that the UK threat level remains at severe, meaning that an attack is highly likely. We'd urge the British people to remain vigilant, and the Home Secretary will keep the House updated. But let's be clear, terrorists seek to threaten our values and our way of life, and they will never succeed. Mr. Speaker, it's a reminder of what a precious thing our democracy is. And this budget debate is part of that democratic process. Mr. Speaker, this is the first time in 20 years that a Chancellor has spoken on the last day of the budget debate. And I think it's fair to say that we've had a livelier debate about this budget than many. But let's be clear, the key principles behind this budget are that if we're going to deliver a strong and compassionate society for the next generation, we have to live within our means. We have to back business to create.
Well, you're watching Sky News at 1 o'clock, and the breaking news is that Brussels has been under attack. 2 explosions hit the departure hall at the city's airport in what appears to be suicide bombings. Within an hour, a separate attack at Melbeck metro station near the European Parliament. Reports are that at least 34 people have been killed. Dozens more are injured.
We had a big bang, everybody cried and came along here. We saw kind of smoke.
Hundreds of troops being deployed in Brussels, with people told to stay indoors amid fears of other attacks.
These were attacks in Belgium. They could just be attacks, just as well be attacks in Britain or in France or Germany or elsewhere in Europe. And we need to stand together against these appalling terrorists and make sure they can never win.
And as the Prime Minister vows to stand together with the people of Belgium, security has stepped up in Britain. This is the scene at Birmingham Airport. So one story dominating this lunchtime, the terror attacks in Brussels. The Belgian Prime Minister says that what they had feared had happened, with 3 explosions at 2 separate locations. The Belgian Prime Minister said many are dead, many more are wounded. Well, these are the latest developments brought to us by Ian Woods.
Moments after 2 explosions ripped through the terminal building and passengers were running for their lives. There were reports of shouting in Arabic immediately prior to the twin blasts.
Please do approach the airport.
8. Everybody has to evacuate to the gate 8:30.
There were immediate reports of casualties, but the number of dead and injured would rise steadily over the next 2 hours.
I hear an explosion and all the ceilings is going down. And then I just go under the sink, and then the second explosion went, and then everything is black. And I see, when I go out, I see a lot of people with blood, and I just run out of the airport.
One gunshot afterwards, and there was one man who was speaking Arabic afterwards, and I heard boom, an enormous explosion, after people, and I said to myself, I'll try to save more people.
We felt the sound. We felt the shock waves of those explosions.
Sky correspondent Alex Rossi and his colleagues were in the departure lounge preparing to board a flight.
We're all being moved out of the airport now towards the emergency exit. There is a great deal of confusion here. Certainly there are a number of, as you might imagine, very upset, very frightened people.
4 days after Belgian anti-terrorism officials were congratulating themselves on the arrest of the country's most wanted man, the main suspect behind the gun and suicide bomb outrage in Paris, Brussels was now under attack.
We had a big bang, everybody cried and came along here. We saw kind of smoke, you know, so the shopkeeper went out and said, no, it's nothing urgent, because they are working here.
It was a very loud explosion.
Yes, it was very loud. Yes, it was not something that fell on the ground, you know, or something like that. It was you felt kind of shock.
It was very frightening. I mean,
yes.
I heard it. I was in duty free.
Yes.
It was very frightening.
Yes, it was.
The country's interior minister immediately raised the terror alert status to its highest level. But just as he was doing so, there was another explosion. This time at Melbeek metro station, close to European Union offices. There was soon evidence of casualties there too, as the emergency services responded to 2 major incidents in different parts of the city. All metro stations throughout the Belgian capital were closed as a precaution. Images of passengers escaping from a darkened underground tunnel will rekindle memories of the 7/7 attacks in London.
I was getting off the metro station in Artlois, which is the one just preceding Malbec, where the explosion took place, when we heard a loud muffled thud, and a lot of kind of dust was raised up in the down by the tracks. Some panic kind of set in. Some people started to rush out of the metro station very quickly, and they were met by soldiers at the top of the stairs who immediately evacuated the place.
Back at the airport, passengers had been herded outside the terminal for their own safety.
We're really searching now, and it's a crisis center, so I don't know yet really. So just our first thing is get people off tarmac and go to a secure area. So please line up and take the buses, please, as soon as you can. If you can, women and children first, please, for the buses. Okay, go.
Shivering passengers, unprepared for being outside in the cold, were given blankets.
How far do you think you were from the explosion?
I don't know.
It felt muffled, so I knew we were not very close to it, but we were close enough that it reverberated throughout our entire bodies. So I don't know how far, but
they said it happened
too close.
They said it happened in check-in.
Eventually, everyone boarded buses to be driven to a crisis centre which had been established at the airport. But at the same time, the Belgian authorities were advising people to stay where they were and not travel. No one knew where was safe. Belgian Prime Minister Charles Michel said what we feared has happened, and says authorities are worried there will be more attacks. He said there were many dead, many injured, and border controls had been reinforced. He told a news conference, "We realise we face a tragic moment. We have to be calm and show solidarity." There were also expressions of outrage and support from across Europe, as well as increased security at other major airports. But the attacks have again shown how vulnerable transport centres are to suicide bombers. Ian Woods, Sky News.
Let's bring you the latest information, more details emerging from those attacks at the airport in Brussels. We already reported to you that police saying, or the reports are that the police are saying that they discovered a Kalashnikov, an assault rifle, beside one of the bodies of what's thought to be a suicide bomber. Also now hearing reports that the police have discovered a non-exploded bomb belt at the airport. This coming from one of the Belgian broadcasters, that alongside, in addition to, I should say, a Kalashnikov assault rifle, a non-exploded bomb belt has also been discovered. Well, we'll confirm those reports as we get more on them. But let's talk now. You saw Sky's Alex Rossi in that report by Ian Woods. Alex Rossi was checking in at the airport at the time of the explosions. He's now outside, and Alex joins us live and just bring us up to date with what's happening there, Alex.
Well, we were checking in, as you were saying, Dermot. We'd gone through security. We were in duty free at the time. I was buying chocolates for my children for Easter, and then we heard the sound of two very large explosions. We didn't just hear them, we also felt the blast as well. A lot of people panicking, as you can imagine, people looking for shelter. I think most people instinctively, like us, knew that the airport was under terrorist attack. At that time, of course, there wasn't any confirmation at this time, but people trying to seek shelter. And then, of course, people coming towards us out from the check-in area, being taken into the secure area behind it. I saw one woman, she had blood streaming down her face. We also saw a man in a wheelchair who had injuries to his leg. But certainly, I think most people were under no illusions about what was going on. But the big fear, of course, is that it would be continuous, or there would be another blast as well. You can see the airport behind me, Dermot. We're about, I don't know, probably less than a mile away from it now. We walked here, as lots of the other passengers have done as well from the airport. They have gone to a crisis centre, and of course the Belgian authorities are now trying to deal with the logistical challenge of what to do with all those people. I would say a few thousand people, airport pretty busy, as you would expect for the sort of morning rush, really. People getting on flights, people going on holiday, people going on business, that type of thing. But of course, what do you do with those people now? How do you get them back to where they need to go? How do you get them home, or where they need to go to? So that is the logistical challenge at the moment for the Belgian authorities. Parts of Brussels, of course, are under lockdown. The transport system is also under lockdown, and the airport, all of the flights have been grounded.
And just give us that sense, Alex, you know, your dramatic report as you were being moved around the airport. There must have been a sense of confusion there at the time, and as you touched on there, the thought in the immediate aftermath that this might not be the end of the attacks. Everyone around you remained very calm.
Yeah, people very, very calm indeed. I don't know whether that was as a result of the shock. And I mean, initially, which you probably don't see from our footage, initially when the blasts happened, this is before we started filming, people were panicking. They didn't know where to go or where to turn, because obviously the fear is that there are going to be more explosions, two very, very loud blasts. But I think after that, people just shocked, and you can see it on their faces. Some people, of course, crying, other people, the shock kind of manifesting itself in a very physical way. I saw a number of passengers just shaking, finding it very difficult to speak, very difficult to communicate. And I think the other thing that's worth bearing in mind as well for the people who work at the airport, the people I suppose who then had to take charge of the situation, they've also experienced this. They've also gone through it. They too are extremely frightened. They are distressed as well, and they don't know how to react or what exactly they should do with people. It took some time before anybody came, any police came and started guiding people out of the airport. And I think at that point, the contingency plan, which authorities everywhere around the world have in place for this type of thing, I think at that stage things started to then kick in. We were taken from the airport outside onto the tarmac, and then coaches started arriving, taking people to this crisis centre that I was talking about a minute ago. But very, very, very shocking, very, very distressing. And I think when it first happened, the initial fear was that there were going to be more attacks. It was going to carry on. It was going to continue. I think it took some time before people thought, actually, it's over.
Alex, for the time being, thank you very much. Alex Rossi there live for us at the airport in Brussels. And Alex talking there about the fear of more attacks. And the next bit of information I'm going to bring you relates to that fear. The Belgian Prime Minister already said that there could potentially be more attacks. And we are hearing now that one of the main nuclear power plants in Belgium has been evacuated. Now, as you know, as you probably know from experience of viewing these incidents, that there are, in the aftermath of such tragedies, such horrors, quite a few false alarms, there are jitters, there are the natural fears that something else may take place. We don't know which category this piece of information fits into at the moment. We are just hearing reported that the nuclear power plant has been evacuated according to the public broadcaster. More details on that if they emerge. Well, let's now take an overview of the main sites involved in the attack. And we first heard of an explosion at the airport in Brussels. It's almost precisely 8:30 Brussels time this morning, of course an hour ahead of the UK. Reports now say that was a suicide attack, possibly involving 2 bombers. Now, those explosions seem to take place in the departure hall, as subsequent footage seems to have shown. That's the land side part of the building. So, as we've been discussing, there wouldn't have been any need to pass through security to arrive there. They check inside before you go through security to fly. Passengers then, amongst them Sky's Alex Rossi, had to leave the terminal, and we've seen videos of people running away from the explosions. And Alex was in the terminal and was, as I say, amongst those leaving. We've also seen images of passengers waiting on the tarmac outside the airport while police and security officials tried to understand what was going on and calm people down and keep the situation under control. Now, those explosions that we described at the airport at 8:30, at around about 9:40, just an hour and a bit later, there were reports of an explosion at a metro station, Maelbeek metro station there in the heart of the city. And as a result of that, 20 deaths have been reported. It seems there was an explosion inside one of the carriages of the tube as it arrived at the station, of course, in the midst of the morning rush hour. One of the most worrying details about the attacks for the security services is just how close the metro station is to one of the main EU buildings, the headquarters of the European Union Commission, only a very short distance along the road there from the metro. Staff have been told to stay indoors as Brussels once again is put in a state of lockdown. Now, implications for the United Kingdom. We've just heard from the Prime Minister.
Chaired a meeting of Cobra here in London to make sure that we're doing everything we can to enhance our own security, and there'll be increased police presence at ports, airports, underground stations and international railway stations, as you'd expect. But these are difficult times, these are appalling terrorists, but we must stand together to do everything we can to stop them and to make sure that although they attack our way of life and they attack us because of who we are, we will never let them win.
What is the government security assessment of the implications of the attacks in Brussels for this country?
Well, we obviously have still got information coming in, and if there is information that implies there's a direct threat to the United Kingdom, then we'd raise the security threat level even higher than it is today. But it already stands at severe, which means we believe an attack is highly likely, and that has been the case for some time. So we'll continue to keep the situation under review. We'll continue to make sure that Cobra meets and to make sure we do everything we can to keep the British people safe. But we face a very real terrorist threat right across the different countries of Europe, and we have to meet that with everything we have. Today is a day for sympathy and condolence, for enhancing our own security, for working with our Belgian colleagues and offering them every help that we can, and to making sure we're very clear we will never let these terrorists win.
Saying never let the terrorists win, and confirming for the time being that the UK terror threat stays at one notch below the top level, stays at severe, below the critical level. And this is the latest video footage from the outside, as you can work out for yourselves, of the main terminal of the airport, clearly showing there the power of the explosions that took place inside that airport. We're also hearing that a controlled explosion has been carried out. As you can imagine, so many pieces of luggage scattered around the floor. We've seen footage of that from inside, so many pieces of luggage scattered around in there. Naturally, the security services are going to be very wary of them, especially as we've also had reports, as you can see at the bottom of your screen there, that an unexploded bomb belt was found at the airport. That alongside reports that a Kalashnikov assault rifle has been discovered as well. Well, we're also hearing now that a controlled explosion has been carried out, and there we've seen it now from the inside and from the outside, the force of that explosion, and the reports of 14 people killed in those explosions. Let's just talk now a bit more about the UK response, and in particular what the Prime Minister said after the emergency meeting, Cabinet Office emergency meeting there, the Cobra meeting. Let's talk to our political editor, Faisal Islam.
Including the Home Secretary, the Foreign Secretary, the Chancellor, the Mayor of London and the Security Service Chiefs meeting with the Prime Minister. In terms of the terror threat level, as you said, that has not been raised. It wasn't raised at Paris at the moment. It's at the second highest level, which is severe, which means an attack is highly likely, though not deemed imminent. That would be the case if it was raised to critical. It was not raised to critical. There is no direct intelligence of a read-through to something happening in the United Kingdom, but some precautions taken, some reassurance for the public from intensified border checks at ports and airports and on underground and transit systems too. This really is at this stage about logistics and fact-finding. We do have an update for you from Downing Street, which is that the Prime Minister's spokeswoman has said that we are aware of one British national injured at the airport, at Brussels Airport, working to ensure consular support for them. The picture could change, though. It's not a complete picture. So confirmation of one British casualty, an injury, not a fatality there, from Downing Street. We expect some symbols of solidarity with the Belgian people in Downing Street, lowering flags to half-mast over departmental buildings here in the United Kingdom, and perhaps a Belgian flag over Downing Street in the next 24 hours. It's early stages yet. The Prime Minister also talked about intelligence sharing, as you'd expect with Belgian security forces. Of course you'd expect that as well. But the central message, one of reassurance to the British people that necessary measures are being taken, though no imminent rise in the threat level just yet.
Faisal, thank you very much indeed for the update. Our political editor, Faisal Islam, there live for us in Downing Street. Well, let's talk now to John Gearson, Professor of National Security Studies at King's College London and a former government advisor on terrorism. Also joined by Chris Phillips, who's former head of the National Counterterrorism Office. He joins us from our Westminster studio. Good afternoon to you both, gentlemen. Chris Phillips, people looking at the kind of pictures we're looking at and hearing the kind of information we are hearing think Brussels is very close, as is Paris, to London and indeed the UK. Does this mean that a terror attack or attacks are getting closer to the UK?
I think we've lived in fear of a terrorist attack, and quite rightly so, for many years now. This doesn't really change the situation in the UK. It does show that Brussels has got real problems with not only the intelligence of who is operating in Brussels, but the fact they just don't know pretty much anything that's going on there, it seems. And also there's been some worrying comments made by people as a result of the recent arrest, which has meant that anyone that was thinking of going to commit a terrorist attack was going to accelerate that.
I mean, do you go along with that, John Gearson? I mean, could this have been an attack that was planned for elsewhere, that's been adapted to respond to those arrests?
It's possible that it's been brought forward. I still would believe that this is likely to be a Belgium-based cell. A cell is the wrong expression. A grouping, a collection of individuals who want to carry out attacks. And I think they would have planned this fairly carefully, attacking an airport and a metro stop near the centre of the EU. This is not an individual running into the streets and randomly picking people to attack. So I think it's probably a rather more considered attack than one might believe. But I do believe that the Prime Minister is right in suggesting that any country in Europe could be a threat. But at the moment, I do think that Belgium and France are probably on higher or believe themselves to be more at risk than a country like Britain or perhaps Germany.
Well, let's examine that in more detail. Chris Phillips, you mentioned there that it seems, and we can't know for sure, but the authorities in Belgium, who've been having a severe crackdown since the Paris attacks, well, obviously they didn't see this one coming, and Salah Abdeslam was on the loose, it seems, not very far away from them during one of the biggest manhunts in history. Can we contrast that or compare it with what the security agencies know and are doing in the United Kingdom?
Well, certainly what we can look at is the fact that the most wanted man in Europe, probably in the world, was able to live in a flat just a couple of hundred yards from his home address at a time when he was so wanted that French police and Belgian police were pulling out all the stops to try and find him. It's pretty inconceivable, I would suggest, that someone wouldn't have reported that in the UK. This guy was out wandering around the streets and had been seen by local shopkeepers. I think what it shows is that Belgian authorities seem to have a massive blind spot in that area with intelligence gaps that they're struggling to fill at the moment. And of course, as soon as they mention that once he's been arrested that he is talking to police and he is telling police what he was going to do, anyone that was waiting to decide when to attack would possibly bring that forward, because the alternative is that they would get arrested before they were able to carry out their attack.
Well, there's that, and just staying with you, Chris Phillips, there's that, isn't there, the element of trying to prevent an attack fail there. There's also then, I'm thinking about the UK, if heaven forfend one should take place, or indeed many of them, speed of response, that's also something that has been under preparation for many months and years now in the UK.
Yeah, bearing in mind that we've lived with terrorism for literally 100 years, one form of terrorism or another. So we have got some tried and trusted plans. Those have changed in light of the tactics that are being used. But we've also got to bear in mind that the choice of tactics is that of the terrorists, not of the police. And on this occasion, it does appear that one of the attacks at least was a suicide bomber. There's no reason to think that the next attack would be exactly the same, and it could just be left luggage or something that's totally different than we've seen before. So the police have to be on their toes. But of course, as soon as the terrorists have got bombs and guns in their hands, then it's pretty much too late. You're really struggling to prevent that. The idea is that we have intelligence that allows us to identify those people that are likely to do it and then stop them before they get their bombs.
Well, John Gearson, I mean, there are reports that a Kalashnikov has been discovered at Brussels airport. Just tell us about what the UK is like in preventing that kind of war weaponry getting into the country, and if it does, trying to get their hands on it.
Well, Britain has had, very strict gun control for many years, and we further restricted it in the last decade, following certain incidents, non-terrorist incidents. And of course, by the fact we're an island and not part of the Schengen Agreement, it is much harder for criminals to smuggle weapons into the UK. It's not unprecedented. We have seen semi-automatic weapons used, but they don't seem to be in the numbers that you might find relatively easily in Europe. There have been reports of Kalashnikovs being available for 300 or 400 euros in Belgium, for example, last December, I recall. So we've got a different approach to gun control, but also we have a different approach to terrorism to some extent. Britain has learnt through, unfortunately, bitter experience that the solution to this is to keep populations together rather than to divide them, and that the security response is not the only way to deal with terrorism. And I do think the last decade showed the police and security services finessing their approach to the communities from which some of these terrorists came from, in a way that I believe one can reasonably say the French and the Belgians are still struggling with that.
And Chris Phillips, last practical thought as we approach a miserable Easter weekend in this country. So many people got their plans to fly out of the UK. What do you think might be the knock-on effect in terms of increased security at the airports they use?
Well, first and foremost, this is not the first attack at an airport of this type. In Moscow in 2011, we saw almost an identical type of an attack where, because there's no security on the external bits of the airport, then someone was able to take a suitcase in. So we have learnt in the UK from experience. As a result of the attack in Glasgow, as an example, it's very difficult now to get your vehicle close to the terminal, and we've done a lot to stop that from happening again, an attack like that. So what you can think of is the UK has done a great deal of learning, learning from bad experiences, but learning from things that have happened in different parts of the world. It may well be that at some stage in the future, if this type of attack happens again, that you will see security on the external bits of the airport. So if you go to Istanbul, as an example, you get searched as you're going into the terminal, not just when you're going through the middle of it to the aeroplane. So things may have to change again. We must continue to learn from our experiences, but this could happen in the UK. Let's just hope the security services are on hand to deal with it.
John Gearson, I mean, alongside that, will there be increased surveillance? Do you think people dotted amongst the crowds in the airports keeping an eye out for suspicious behaviour?
Well, I think physical security has two effects. A, it can be useful for deterrence purposes, and B, for the reassurance of the public. But actually these campaigns are won by intelligence, by these organisations understanding that the government's agencies know so much about them that they find it very difficult to operate. What are these people trying to achieve by these attacks? They're trying to communicate to the publics of Western countries that they can't go about their ordinary lives and that they are going to be disrupted repeatedly. What's that for? It's to raise questions in the minds of our publics about why are they doing it, and is it connected to some sort of policies that we could change? I mean, that's the objective of this. This isn't spasmodic violence just desiring to kill Belgians and international people. They want to achieve ends, and if this does prove to be a plot linked to Islamic State, Daesh, it's an interesting change of direction for the organisation, which perhaps under the pressure that it is under in Syria and Iraq, is either looking for new places to form again, but also to put us under pressure.
John Gearson, thank you very much indeed, and thanks once again to Chris Phillips as well. It's 1:30. Let's bring you right up to date with what's happened in Brussels today. 2 explosions took place in the departure hall of Brussels airports, killing up to 14 people and injuring 35, including 1 Briton amongst the injured. Reports suggest police discovered an unexploded bomb belt at the airport and a Kalashnikov rifle. All flights have been cancelled. Shortly after those attacks, there was a 3rd explosion at Melbeek metro station. That's near to some of the main European Union administration buildings. At least 20 people are thought to have been killed in that attack and 55 injured. Well, speaking about the attacks, the Belgian Prime Minister said this is a dark moment for our nation. We need calm and solidarity. He added the authorities are worried there could be more attacks. All public transport systems in Brussels are closed at the moment. And here the Foreign Office says UK citizens in Brussels should avoid crowded areas. And the Prime Minister has chaired a meeting of the government's emergency committee and said the threat level remains at severe. Police forces across the UK have increased their presence at key locations. Sky's Ian Woods now reports.
Those who survived the explosions lay cowering on the ground, afraid to move in case there were more blasts to come.
What it was? A drop, or was it a terrorist?
Closer to where the bombs had been detonated, bodies and debris covered the floor of the airport terminal, where moments earlier men, women and young children had been checking in for their flights. Pushchairs and luggage were abandoned in the dust and chaos. Outside, people were running for their lives. There were reports of shouting in Arabic immediately prior to the twin blasts.
Please do a problem in the airport. Everybody has to evacuate to the gate 8:30.
There were immediate reports of casualties, but the number of dead and injured would rise steadily over the next 2 hours.
I heard an explosion and all the ceilings is going down. And then I just go under the sink, and then the second explosion went, and then everything is black. And I see, when I go out, I see a lot of people with blood, and I just run out of the airport.
One gunshot afterwards, and there was one man who was speaking Arabic afterwards, and I heard boom, an enormous explosion, after people and I said to myself, I'll try to save more people.
We felt the sound. We felt the shockwaves of those explosions.
Sky correspondent Alex Rossi and his colleagues were in the departure lounge preparing to board a flight.
We're all being moved out of the airport now towards the emergency exit. There is a great deal of confusion here. Certainly there are a number of, as you might imagine, very upset, very frightened people.
4 days after Belgian anti-terrorism officials were congratulating themselves on the arrest of the country's most wanted man, the main suspect behind the gun and suicide bomb outrage in Paris, Brussels was now under attack.
We had a big bang, everybody cried and came along here. We saw kind of smoke, you know, so the shopkeeper went out and said, no, it's nothing urgent, because they are working here.
It was a very loud explosion.
Yes, it was very loud. Yes, it was not something that fell on the ground, you know, or something like that. It was you felt kind of shock.
It was very frightening. I mean,
yes.
I heard it. I was in duty free.
Yes.
It was very frightening.
Yes, it was.
The country's interior minister immediately raised the terror alert status to its highest level. But just as he was doing so, there was another explosion. This time at Melbeek metro station, close to European Union offices. There was soon evidence of casualties there too, as the emergency services responded to 2 major incidents in different parts of the city. All metro stations throughout the Belgian capital were closed as a precaution. Images of passengers escaping from a darkened underground tunnel will rekindle memories of the 7/7 attacks in London.
I was getting off the metro station in Arlois, which is the one just preceding Malbec, where the explosion took place, when we heard a loud, muffled thud, and a lot of kind of dust was raised up in the down by the tracks. Some panic kind of set in. Some people started to rush out of the metro station very quickly, and they were met by soldiers at the top of the stairs who immediately evacuated the place.
Back at the airport, passengers had been herded outside the terminal for their own safety.
We're really searching now, and it's a crisis center, so I don't know yet really. So just our first thing is get people off tarmac and go to a secure area. So please line up and take the buses, please, as soon as you can. If you can, women and children first, please, for the buses. We'll get cold.
Shivering passengers, unprepared for being outside in the cold, were given blankets.
How far do you think you were from the explosion?
I don't know.
It felt muffled, so I knew we were not very close to it, but we were close enough that it reverberated throughout our entire bodies. So I don't know how far, but
they said it happened
too close.
They said it happened in check-in.
Eventually, everyone boarded buses to be driven to a crisis centre which had been established at the airport. But at the same time, the Belgian authorities were advising people to stay where they were and not travel. No one knew where was safe. Belgian Prime Minister Charles Michel said what we feared has happened, and says authorities are worried there will be more attacks. He said there were many dead, many injured, and border controls had been reinforced. He told a news conference, "We realise we face a tragic moment. We have to be calm and show solidarity." There were also expressions of outrage and support from across Europe, as well as increased security at other major airports. But the attacks have again shown how vulnerable transport centres are to suicide bombers. Ian Woods, Sky News.
Well, we can talk now to Major General Chip Chapman as we take in there the scenes from outside Brussels airport, and that's also the that's a shot change there to the shot outside the metro station where another attack, the second site, 2 bombs thought to have exploded at the airport. Reports that a Kalashnikov has been recovered, also an unexploded suicide belt. Well, as I say, Major General Chip Chapman joins me now, former head of counterterrorism at the MOD, the Ministry of Defence. Good afternoon to you, Major General. Do you think that this is directly related to all the anti-terror activity and arrests that have been taking place in Brussels?
Well, we know from the capture of Abdul Salam on Friday that he warned of attacks which would come in the future. So I'm slightly surprised that the Belgians didn't go to critical straight away, because if they thought an attack was imminent based on that sort of intelligence, they should have probably gone to critical before they wrapped up the network. And of course the network wasn't wrapped up, as we've seen with these tragic events today. I also said on Sky on Friday that just because Abdul Salam had been captured, there were still potentially domestic plotters out there, or those foreign fighters who'd returned who could energise cells. So in that sense, I'm not surprised something's occurred. I'm surprised the Belgians didn't go to critical and try and preempt it.
Well, do you also think, I mean, on that note, that reports emerged, I don't know where they were sourced, that Abdul Salam was prepared to cooperate, was prepared to talk, sending signals out to those that are prepared to act, that perhaps they better act quickly?
Well, indeed. Now, the sophistication of this with 2 locations would suggest to you that, or suggest to me, that there was both reconnaissance and pre-planning. They may have brought the timeline forward, but this was obviously a plot which was in train already and could therefore have been preempted. If you've got a number of plots and you have to source all the information and resources of the explosives, the detonation, all those things, you should technically be able to preempt these things.
And it also seems confirmation, if we needed it after Paris, that people with some detailed technological knowledge, detailed abilities to carry out these kind of attacks are involved. And the link with Syria, your thoughts?
Well, we know that IS are in trouble in both Syria and Iraq, and indeed their propaganda leads us to suggest that what they're trying to do is retain and expand. None of those things are happening in Syria and Iraq, so there's a big debate in IS between localism, the ingathering of people in those 2 countries, and globalism. So they've got to show success. They can't show success at the moment in Iraq and Syria, so they've got to try and show success externally in foreign countries, and hitting iconic capital cities is the best way to get that sort of propaganda exposure.
Well, we've got one of those in the UK. Should it send a shiver down the spine of the UK security services? We're told that there are several score, if not hundreds, of fighters who've returned to the UK.
Well, the figures were released only last week of those who were arrested for counter-terrorism offences, which showed 280 people had been arrested in 2015. The last 2 people who were prosecuted last year were going for a similar plot. They were going to bomb both Westfield and the London Underground. All this comes under the rubric of what we call crowded places, and indeed since both the 2005 London attacks and the 2007 London and Glasgow airport attacks, a lot of work has gone into making those harder targets to ensure that the casualties which take place in those are lessened if such an event occurs.
And with that link to Syria, I mean, are we talking about direct command and control, or is it more freelance, the sense that when you get back to wherever you're going to get back to, you know what to do?
Well, I would suspect that these are inspired by IS, not guided and directed by IS. Again, if you had that sort of communication at distance, by whatever means, that should be both in terms of communications intelligence and electronic intelligence, something that someone should be able to preempt. So I think this is freelance.
OK, so there's all that going on below the line. Is there anything more in terms of overt security that might change, particularly at those transport hubs?
Well, of course, after the event, we always see that more people are turned out, security people, to provide reassurance. to the population. And indeed, that's sort of what's required because we need to be seen to be the protective state. It's worth saying I was in Brussels last October and troops had been on the streets there for a number of months already, so it doesn't necessarily mean that just because you've got troops or a high overt security presence on the streets, you preempt these things. You do need clever intelligence, either human intelligence or technical intelligence, to really get inside these networks.
But even if you haven't got direct intelligence about an individual or individuals, you can still have more covert intelligence at airports, indeed on tube trains, on aeroplanes themselves, the plainclothes people who know what to look for.
Yeah, you can indeed. I would suspect that the ones that we're likely to get in the UK are more lone wolves. Lone wolf attacks are far more difficult to preempt because you don't get the same triggers as we'd expect when you have a sophisticated plot. And this, because of two locations, comes into that rubric of a sophisticated plot.
OK, well, good to talk to you, Major General, again. Thank you very much indeed. Chip Chapman there, former head of counterterrorism at the Ministry of Defence. Well, let's take you through what happened inside that terminal we've got the live shot of there with its shattered windows. Well, straight after the first explosions at the airport, Sky's Alex Rossi was there at the time.
Go to the emergency exit at the tarmac, please. At the beacons. You can come this way also. Yeah.
We're all being moved out of the airport now towards the emergency exit. There is a great deal of confusion here. Certainly, there are a number of, as you might imagine, very upset, very frightened people. Again, we don't know about the number of injuries, but certainly the people I am with here certainly believe that there is a terrorist attack, although, again, we can't confirm. That hasn't been confirmed by the authorities. But we've been moved now, as you can see probably in our live picture, we've been moved towards an emergency exit. I think, of course, there are fears that there may be other attackers. That is clearly what we have seen in the past with terror attacks on European soil. Multiple spectacular attacks by terrorists targeting key buildings, key institutions. But we're just being sort of shepherded out of the building at the moment. As I was saying, people very, very frightened, very distressed. We had just gone through, we checked in our main luggage into the hold. We'd gone through security, and we were then heading towards Gate B, where our flight to Tel Aviv was going from. We were in the duty-free shop at the time, so we were well inside the airport. Now, the explosions I heard, again, it's very hard because of the way the building is sort of built up. We were in a shop, effectively. It's very hard to work out exactly how close you were to the explosion, but it felt close. It wasn't just a question of hearing the sound. We felt the sound. We felt the shock waves of those explosions. So we were pretty close. Another indication is that we saw the sort of dust come from the ceiling and the shelves in the shop we were in. The bottles juddered on the shelves as well. It was pretty close, but again, it's difficult to say exactly how close. I did try to get towards where
as they mourn the wounded, as they mourn those who were attacked and murdered by radical Islamic terrorism. Today's attacks in Brussels underscores that this is a war. This is not an isolated incident. This is not a lone wolf. This is a war with radical Islamic terrorism. ISIS has declared jihad on Europe and on the United States of America. They have declared their intention to murder as many innocents as possible. And it is long past time that we had a president who will acknowledge this evil, will call it by its name, and utilize the full force and fury of the United States to defeat radical Islamic terrorism, to defeat ISIS. Until they are defeated, these attacks will continue. Until ISIS is utterly destroyed, they will continue to carry out acts of terror, continue to murder, whether at a subway station, whether at an airport, whether at an opera house in Paris, whether at a community center in San Bernardino. Their target is each and every one of us. And we need a president who sets aside political correctness. In the wake of Brussels, we don't need another lecture from President Obama on Islamophobia. We need a commander-in-chief who does everything necessary to defeat the enemy. And we need to immediately halt the president's ill-advised plan to bring in tens of thousands of Syrian Muslim refugees. Our vetting programs are woefully insufficient. This administration has no means of preventing those refugees from being ISIS terrorists. ISIS has stated its intention to infiltrate those terrorists, those refugees, with terrorists coming to America to commit acts of jihad. And the time for the president's political correctness has passed. The first priority of the commander-in-chief should be keeping America safe.
Senator, so beyond Syrian refugees, is it time for the U.S. to close its borders to all Muslims, as Donald Trump suggests?
It is time for us to implement serious vetting, and we should not be allowing anyone to come to this country that we cannot vet to make sure that they are not radical Islamic terrorism. That's part of the problem of not defining the enemy. When you don't define the enemy, then you don't have screening programs designed to keep them out. And I would note, if you look at the San Bernardino terrorists, the female terrorist had publicly posted on social media calls to jihad, and yet the Obama administration, in yet another nod to political correctness, refused even to look to social media. That is an example of the myopia of this administration, and it's politically driven. It's not that they cannot see the threats of terrorism, it's that they refuse to look at, acknowledge, or name the threats of terrorism because it is inconsistent with their political objectives.
Senator, why are you more qualified than Donald Trump said? More or less your main opponent for the Republican nomination would agree with this, said in some fashion or another. What makes you a better commander-in-chief than him on this topic?
Well, I will say it is striking that the day after Donald Trump called for America weakening NATO, withdrawing from NATO, we see Brussels, where NATO is headquartered, the subject of a radical Islamic terrorist attack. Donald Trump is wrong that America should withdraw from the world and abandon our allies. Donald Trump is wrong that America should retreat from Europe, retreat from NATO, hand Putin a major victory, and while he's at it, hand ISIS a major victory.
Then what should NATO do?
NATO should join with the United States in utterly destroying ISIS, and I would note that NATO is ready to act in a way that our president is not. Donald Trump's proposal to withdraw from the world, to withdraw from NATO, to withdraw from Europe is sadly consistent with his statement that he intends to be neutral between Israel and the Palestinians. We have seen for 7 years a president that cannot distinguish between our friends and our enemies, a president that cannot distinguish between the nation of Israel and Islamic terrorists who seek to murder us. And it would be a mistake to elect another president who buys into the same left-wing moral relativism that equates the terrorist blowing himself up and murdering innocent civilians to the brave soldiers and law enforcement officers risking everything to keep us safe.
Senator, on Mornings with Maria this morning, Donald Trump was asked about the visa waiver program, and not just Muslims, but also potentially Christians, atheists, whoever, whether that program should be put on hold for everyone. And he more than implied that he would be in favor of that. Would you agree?
There's no doubt we need serious scrutiny to the visa waiver program. The attack in Brussels is in many ways the fruit of a failed immigration policy in Europe that has allowed a massive influx of radical Islamic terrorists into Europe. Europe is in the process of allowing policies to fundamentally threaten the safety and security of its citizens. That is a mistake. And the visa waiver program was designed for a different era when those from Europe were not perceived to be threats. When Europe's immigration policies allow radical Islamic terrorists to make Europe their home, we absolutely need to revisit our immigration policies across the board to prevent radical Islamic terrorists from coming to America.
Senator, when you say that today's attacks were the result of bad immigration policy...
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
President Obama's in Cuba, as you know, right now. Do you believe he should return home rather than continue the rest of his foreign trip?
While our friends and allies are attacked by radical Islamic terrorists, President Obama is spending his time going to baseball games with the Castros and standing at a press conference with Raul Castro as a prop, while Castro denies there are any political prisoners in Cuba. And then even worse, President Obama goes out of his way to agree with Castro's attacks on America. I recognize President Obama began his presidency with a worldwide apology tour. But the people of America deserve a president who doesn't grovel before a communist dictator who hates America, is attacking our nation, and instead of the president enthusiastically agreeing with the Castros on his attacks with America, we need a president who will stand up and defend America as the greatest light of freedom the world has ever seen. No other nation has spilled more blood, has spent more treasure, has lost the lives of more children, preserving liberty, preserving the lives of others than has the United States of America. And President Obama should be back in America keeping this country safe, or President Obama should be planning to travel to Brussels. You know, in the wake of the Paris terror attacks, world leaders came together in solidarity with the people of Paris. And yet strikingly absent was Barack Obama. A visual manifestation of President Obama and Hillary Clinton's retreat from the world, abdication of leadership in the world. And I would note that retreat from the world, the Obama-Clinton retreat from the world, is very much the retreat from the world that Donald Trump is advocating. Even Barack Obama hasn't gone so far as arguing for withdrawing from NATO the way Donald Trump has. And the way to respond to terrorist attacks is not weakness, is not unilateral and preemptive surrender, abandoning Europe, withdrawing from NATO, as Trump suggests, is preemptive surrender. We need a president who understands that America needs to lead. We need to protect the interest and security of America first, and we don't do so by leading from behind. We do so by standing with our friends and allies, standing with the nation of Israel, standing with Europe, and we do so by defeating the jihadists that seek to murder us. These are serious times, and we need a commander-in-chief who understands the nature of the threat, who will call it by its name, and who will utterly destroy it. The first thing you do in response to any attack is utilize law enforcement and national security tools to make sure there are no attacks imminent, to track down everyone related to the cell and prevent any immediate attacks. But beyond that, we need a comprehensive strategy. ISIS, where it is located in Iraq and Syria, we need a comprehensive strategy to utterly destroy them. That involves carpet bombing them to oblivion, taking out their command and control headquarters, taking out their communications lines, taking out their infrastructure, taking out their energy, taking out the oil fields, taking out their sources of revenue, taking out their finance, taking out their personnel. It involves arming the Kurds on the ground, who are our boots on the ground and are fighting with ISIS now, and this president still refuses for political reasons to arm them. It involves using embedded special forces and whatever troops are necessary, but we will not send American troops into combat with rules of engagement, as this president does, that ties their hands behind their back and makes it impossible for them to fight and defend themselves. If and when America uses military force, we should use overwhelming force. Kill the enemy, and then we should get the heck out. And consistent with that, we should be working closely with our allies to track down and apprehend radical Islamic terror. The reason President Obama doesn't do so is because of his political correctness. Political correctness is not simply an odd verbal tick that President Obama and Hillary Clinton and the entire Obama administration has. Political correctness impacts policy, because if you will not acknowledge the threat as radical Islamic terrorism, then we don't implement policies to defeat radical Islamic terrorism. That will change, and it will change soon. Thank you.
Okay, I go. My second.
Niks buiten.
What it was? A job, or was it a terrorist?
This is Sky News at 2. Breaking news, Brussels under attack. 2 explosions hit the departure hall at the city's airport in what appears to be a suicide bombing. Within an hour, a separate attack at Malbeek metro station near the European Parliament. At least 34 people have been killed, dozens more are wounded.
We had a big bang, everybody cried and came along here. We saw kind of smoke.
Hundreds of troops are being sent to Brussels, with people told to stay indoors amid fears of another attack.
These were attacks in Belgium. They could just be attacks, just as well be attacks in Britain or in France or Germany or elsewhere in Europe. And we need to stand together against these appalling terrorists and make sure they can never win.
As the Prime Minister vows to stand together with the people of Belgium, security has stepped up in Britain. This is the scene at Birmingham Airport. Good afternoon. One story dominates this afternoon: the terror attacks in Brussels. The Belgian Prime Minister says what they had feared had happened, with 3 blasts at 2 separate locations. He said many are dead, many more are wounded, and attackers could still be at large. These are the latest developments. 2 explosions in the departure hall of Brussels Airport killed up to 14 people and injured 92, including 1 Briton. Reports suggest police have also discovered an unexploded bomb belt at the airport. Shortly afterwards, there was a 3rd explosion at Malbeek metro station near to the main EU buildings. At least 20 people are thought to have been killed and 106 people injured. Well, speaking about the attacks, the Belgian Prime Minister said, "This is a dark moment for our nation. We need calm and solidarity." He added the authorities are worried there'll be more attacks. All public transport systems in Brussels are closed. Police in the UK have increased their presence at key locations. David Cameron has chaired a meeting of the government's emergency committee and said the threat level remains at severe. Sky's Ian Woods reports.
Those who survived the explosions lay cowering on the ground, afraid to move in case there were more blasts to come.
What it was? A job or was it a terrorist?
Closer to where the bombs had been detonated, bodies and debris covered the floor of the airport terminal, where moments earlier men, women and young children had been checking in for their flights. Pushchairs and luggage were abandoned in the dust and chaos. Outside, people were running for their lives. There were reports of shouting in Arabic immediately prior to the twin blasts.
Please do not come in the airport. Everybody has to evacuate to the gate 8:30.
There were immediate reports of casualties, but the number of dead and injured would rise steadily over the next 2 hours.
I heard an explosion and all the ceilings is going down. And then I just go under the sink, and then the second explosion went, and then everything is black. And I see, when I go out, I see a lot of people with blood, and I just run out of the airport.
One gunshot afterwards, and there was one man who was speaking Arabic afterwards, and I heard boom, an enormous explosion, after people and I said to myself, I'll try to save more people.
We felt the sound. We felt the shock waves of those explosions.
Sky correspondent Alex Rossi and his colleagues were in the departure lounge preparing to board a flight.
We're all being moved out of the airport now towards the emergency exit. There is a great deal of confusion here. Certainly there are a number of, as you might imagine, very upset, very frightened people.
4 days after Belgian anti-terrorism officials were congratulating themselves on the arrest of the country's most wanted man, the main suspect behind the gun and suicide bomb outrage in Paris, Brussels was now under attack.
We had a big bang, everybody cried and came along here. We saw kind of smoke, you know, so the shopkeeper went out and said, no, it's nothing urgent, because they are working here.
It was a very loud explosion.
Yes, it was very loud. Yes, it was not something that fell on the ground, you know, or something like that. It was you felt kind of shock.
It was very frightening. I mean,
yes.
I heard it. I was in
Yes.
duty free.
Yes.
It was very frightening.
Yes, it was.
The country's interior minister immediately raised the terror alert status to its highest level. But just as he was doing so, there was another explosion. This time at Melbeek metro station, close to European Union offices. There was soon evidence of casualties there too, as the emergency services responded to 2 major incidents in different parts of the city. All metro stations throughout the Belgian capital were closed as a precaution. Images of passengers escaping from a darkened underground tunnel will rekindle memories of the 7/7 attacks in London.
I was getting off the metro station in Arlois, which is the one just preceding Malbec, where the explosion took place, when we heard a loud, muffled thud, and a lot of kind of dust was raised up in the down by the tracks. Some panic kind of set in. Some people started to rush out of the metro station very quickly, and they were met by soldiers at the top of the stairs who immediately evacuated the place.
Back at the airport, passengers had been herded outside the terminal for their own safety.
We're really searching now, and there's a crisis center, so I don't know yet really. So just our first thing is get people off tarmac and go to a secure area. So please line up and take the buses, please, as soon as you can. If you can, women and children first, please, for the buses. Okay, cold.
Shivering passengers, unprepared for being outside in the cold, were given blankets.
How far do you think you were from the explosion?
I don't know.
It felt muffled, so I knew we were not very close to it, but we were close enough that it reverberated throughout our entire bodies. So I don't know how far, but
They said it happened
too close.
They said it happened in check-in.
Eventually, everyone boarded buses to be driven to a crisis centre which had been established at the airport. But at the same time, the Belgian authorities were advising people to stay where they were and not travel. No one knew where was safe. Belgian Prime Minister Charles Michel said what we feared has happened and says authorities are worried there will be more attacks.
We have deployed military reinforcements. We have decided to reinforce border controls and take restrictive measures on transport networks. We realise we face a tragic moment. At this dark moment for our country, now more than ever, I would like to appeal to all to be calm and show solidarity.
There were also expressions of outrage and support from across Europe, as well as increased security at other major airports. But the attacks have again shown how vulnerable transport centres are to suicide bombers. Ian Woods, Sky News.
Live pictures from Havana in Cuba. President Obama is, of course, making a visit there. He is due to make a statement shortly. Let's take you to Downing Street in London now, where the Belgian flag has been raised over number 10 Downing Street as a mark of respect for the victims. Flags have been lowered to half-mast on government buildings also as a mark of respect. Let's cross now live, though, to Brussels and speak to our correspondent Alex Rossi, who is at the airport. And Alex, you were in fact inside the airport at the time of the explosions. Just describe for us what happened.
Yeah, we had come here. We'd just finished our assignment covering the capture of Salah Abdul Salam. He was one of the surviving Paris attackers who was caught in that very dramatic siege on Friday. We just checked into the airport to get our flight to the Middle East. Then we had gone through security, so our main luggage had been checked in. We'd left the check-in hall and we just got through security and we're in the duty-free shop at the time. We're just doing kind of routine things. I was looking for chocolates, trying to buy chocolates for my children, and then I heard the sound of two very large explosions. Didn't just hear them, felt them as well. The building around us rattled, the bottles on the shelves of the duty-free shop rattled as well. Dust started coming down from the ceiling and the rest of the building, and then the smell of smoke as well. Now, instinctively, we all knew that it was a terrorist attack. People around us very confused, some people sheltering, trying to look for cover. At this point, of course, we thought there may be other blasts as well, and then people started running out towards us. I saw one woman who had blood coming down her face, another man who was in a wheelchair with a wound to his leg, but a great deal of confusion. People very, very traumatized, very shocked. Some people physically shaking. Lots of people, of course, calling home to their loved ones, to their families, to tell them that they were safe. Now, that happened at about 7:45, between 7:45 and 7:50 local time. We're an hour ahead of you here in London, but we checked in for the morning flight. This, of course, is the softest of targets for a terrorist to strike. Commuters, businessmen, businesswomen going about their business, families. There were plenty of children in there as well, and they were the target of this terrorist attack.
OK, Alex Rossi, thank you. That's the scene at the airport. Let's go into the centre of Brussels now. We can speak to our Europe correspondent, Mark Stone, who is there for us. And what is the situation there now, Mark?
Well, a very large area of this, right in the heart of Brussels here, has now been cordoned off. This is the EU quarter. This is where all the European Union institutions are, and this is where that third attack took place. 2 bombs, as we know, at the airport, and the third one at the metro station, which is just down to the end of this road. If you were to turn right, there is a long, wide avenue which links the European quarter with the Embassy District of Brussels, and halfway along that avenue is Molenbeek train station, and that is where the attack took place. The latest figures that we have from the authorities are that 20 people were killed at the metro station. 106 people have been injured, of whom 17 are severely injured. The images that are now coming out from that underground station show just how utterly frightening it must have been. A very, very dark tunnel, people trying to get off the train, which was stopped in the tunnel. For a time it looked as though there had been two separate attacks at two train stations. The reason for that presumably is that the smoke would have emerged both from the train station here at Schumann, which is literally at the end of the road here, and the train station where the attack took place. People were escaping, as we understand it, from both of those two stations. You can see also here that the flags of the European Union, 28 flags that fly every day here, representing the 28 nations of the European Union, they are now all flying at half-mast. People who hadn't already made it to work at 8:30 this morning when the bomb went off have been told, European Union workers told not to go to work. And if we give you a little look round here as well, you can see the gathered media. This, incidentally, this building behind here is where many of the media who work in Brussels, including ourselves, this is where our offices are. So I would say, unsurprisingly, a profound sense of shock that this has happened in Brussels. I was thinking on our way here, we were actually in Athens this morning. We were taking a flight to Brussels, and halfway through our flight, the pilot said that we were diverting to Düsseldorf because of terrorism at Brussels. He didn't elaborate. The flight crew didn't seem to know what had happened. And I reflected on an interview I did just 2 weeks ago, 2 weeks to the day, with the head of Europol, a British man who said that it was his belief that there would be another terror attack in Europe before long, and it came perhaps more quickly than anyone would have thought. A few other bits of information to give you. We understand that the main train station, Midi station here in Brussels, is due to reopen at 4 p.m. this afternoon. Parents have been told that they should pick up their children as normal from school this afternoon, if indeed they went to school. I should think many people will have decided not to send their children to school this morning. But I suppose, as had been feared, a terror attack has come in Paris, in Brussels. I remember after the Paris attacks, given that many of the attackers from that attack were from Brussels, there was a lockdown then. This was a city where there was a sense of fear throughout it, and there will be once again. We'll move the camera just around. There's a Belgian lady standing just up against this sushi restaurant. I think her face pretty well sums up the mood here today.
Okay, Mark Stone for now. Thank you. Well, we can see an overview of the main sites involved in the attack today. We first heard of a blast at an airport at 8:30 Brussels time this morning. Reports now say that was a suicide attack, possibly involving two bombers. Those explosions seem to have hit the airport's departure hall. That is the landside part of the building, so there would have been no need to pass through security to arrive there. The latest information from Belgian TV station, one of the bombs at the Brussels airport contained nails. Passengers then had to leave the terminal. We've seen videos of people running away from the explosions. Our reporter Alex Rossi, as you heard, was in the terminal and was among those leaving. We've also seen images of passengers waiting on the tarmac outside the airport while police try to get the situation under control. Shortly after those explosions, at 9:40 a.m, we heard reports of an explosion at Molenbeek metro station. 20 deaths were reported there. It seems that there was an explosion inside a metro carriage as it arrived at the station in rush hour. One of the many worrying details about these attacks for the security services is just how close that metro station is to one of the main EU buildings. The headquarters of the EU Commission is only a very short distance along this road. Staff there have been told to stay indoors. Well, Fabrice Deconinck was on a plane at the airport waiting to take off when the explosions happened. He joins us now by Skype from Brussels. Good afternoon to you, Fabrice Deconinck. Tell us, when did you first realise?
hace su entrada al Gran Teatro de La Habana Alicia Alonso, el presidente de los Estados Unidos de América, Barack Obama. Now, entering the Grand Theater of Havana, the President of the United States of America, Barack Obama.
Thank you.
Gracias.
Muchas gracias. Thank you so much.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias.
President Castro,
Presidente Castro,
the people of Cuba,
pueblo cubano,
thank you so much for
muchas
the warm
gracias
welcome
por la calurosa
that I
bienvenida
have received, that
que
my
he
family
recibido
has
yo,
received, and
mi
that our
familia
delegation has received.
y nuestra delegación.
It is an extraordinary honor
Es un
to be
honor
here today.
extraordinario estar aquí hoy.
Before I begin,
Antes de comenzar,
please indulge me.
por
I want
favor,
to comment on
permítanme
the
hacer
terrorist
unos
attacks that have
comentarios
taken
sobre
place
los ataques
in
terroristas
Brussels.
que se sucedieron en Bruselas.
The thoughts and the prayers of the American
Los
people are with the
pensamientos
people of
y
Belgium.
los rezos
We
están
stand in solidarity with them in
del pueblo
condemning
americano
these
están
outrageous
con ellos
attacks
y
against innocent people.
condenamos estos ataques
We will
contra
do
los
whatever is
inocentes. Vamos a
necessary to
hacer todo
support
lo
our
que sea
friend and
necesario
ally
para
Belgium
apoyar a
in
nuestros
bringing
amigos
to
y
justice
aliados
those who are
Bélgica
responsible.
para llevar a la
The
otro
world must unite.
recordatorio que el mundo tiene que estar unido.
We must be together,
Tenemos que
regardless
trabajar
of
juntos, no
nationality,
importa nuestras nacionalidades
or race, or
o
faith,
nuestra raza.
nationality, or race, or faith, in fighting against the scourge of terrorism. We can and we will defeat those who threaten the safety and security of people all around the world. To the government and the people of Cuba, I want to thank you for the kindness that you've shown to me and Michelle, Malia, Sasha, my mother-in-law, Marion. Cultivo una rosa blanca. In his famous most famous poem, Jose Marti made this offering of friendship and peace to both his friend and his enemy. Today, as the President of the United States of America, I offer the Cuban people el saludo.
So we were awaiting the president to make remarks after that horrendous multi-site terror attack across Brussels and a ripple effect of high alert here in this country and around the world as the ISIS terrorists took responsibility for that. His remarks, as you saw, were extremely short off the top. I actually can report more than what he just told you, the president. We do know that he spoke with Belgian Prime Minister Charles Michel. In some of that conversation he mentioned, he offered his condolences on behalf of the American people. The president reaffirmed the steadfast support of the United States for Belgium and offered any assistance necessary. The president not really giving a lot of detail there. Let's bring in Fox News correspondent Doug McElway. So, Doug, we knew that he was working on his remarks for quite really the last 40 minutes or so. I have more on my BlackBerry than the president gave, and we want to tell our viewers exactly what our role now, America, will be next. What are you learning from our national leaders in the Beltway?
Well, I'm struck, as you were, at the brevity of his comments there. Perhaps he's going to mention something further along in his remarks, but I doubt it. I think this was an addition, an addendum to his prepared remarks. It was very, very short. He said, "We will do whatever is necessary for the world to unite. We must be together in fighting the scourge of terrorism." But yet again, no remarks about Islamic fundamentalism and that sort, for which he has been so roundly criticized. I was reminded, Harris, of the extreme criticism that President Obama took in the aftermath of the Charlie Hebdo attacks. His critics say that his decision at that time to stay home rather than march through the streets of Paris alongside Francois Hollande, the president of France, was one that was inexcusable. So we're seeing the same sort of dynamic. The president is not scheduled to come home until Friday. He has a second trip planned from Havana, Cuba, to Argentina, at which point he will make some sort of a sightseeing tour of Patagonia. The contrast between visiting there and the aftermath of this horrific terrorist attack is not going to sit well with the president's critics. We've already heard from Donald Trump and from crews to that effect. And I suspect there'll be much, much more of that coming in the hours and days to come, Harris.
Yeah, I mean, you heard one of the presidential candidates for Republicans, John Kasich, calling for the immediate return home of President Obama to give this immediate attention. And I want to get this in there because this is yet to be confirmed by the State Department, but they are working at our State Department on reports that at least 3 Americans may have been among those who were injured or worse today in Brussels. So, I mean, his remarks, now I've had a chance while you were talking, I was multitasking, and I was reading through the entire readout of the conversation that our president had with Prime Minister Michel of Belgium, and it's only 2 paragraphs long. I had thought that I might even be able to tell people more. He basically just told us that, and it only took a few seconds to do so. I do want to set this into context and get your thoughts on this, Doug, as you're reporting inside our nation's capital today. So all of this, the timing of it, comes after that high investigative asset that they picked up, that 8th suspect after the Paris attacks, who had been, quote-unquote, hiding out in a Brussels suburb called Molenbeek. Hiding out, I put in quotes, because it's a known area where radical Islamists will be. And he'd been there for 4 months since this attack.
4 months, Harris, and it points out that he was, in effect, hiding in plain sight. And it brings me back to the remarks of some of the president's opponents. Donald Trump this morning said, if they're coming from other places, if they're Muslim, they have to be checked very, very carefully. Now, he's been roundly criticized for his suggestion there needs to be a temporary ban on Muslim immigration to this country. But he's trying to make the point that there is not a lot of cooperation in some of these Muslim communities. Molenbeek being the classic example. He was hiding, this guy Salah Abdeslam, in plain sight. Nobody was ratting him out. It suggests that there's a lot of conspiracy to keep him hiding in plain sight here. You throw into that mix the utter ineffectiveness of what we've learned about our Department of Homeland Security with its 97% failure rate in detecting bombs that are going through airport security screening. Now, this particular attack in Brussels happened at the airport outside the security perimeter. That's another weakness here that security authorities are going to have to address in this country and around the world. And the fact that this is all happening 15 years after 9/11 raises some serious concerns.
There are a lot of questions today. I also want to let you know, reporting Hillary Clinton, the Democratic presidential candidate, has also weighed in, as the Republican candidates have as well, and she said that this is a call even louder for the entire world to come together against terrorism. More on all of this, and Doug McElway, thank you very much for your reporting. More on all of this as we continue our coverage today. Please stay tuned to Fox News Channel and this Fox broadcast station for continuing coverage of this and all the day's breaking news. And we are online all the time when you want news, foxnews.com. I'm Harris Faulkner in New York.
This has been a Fox News Special Report.